Hello and welcome to the Hurling Show on OurGame. Here, myself, Shane Stapleton, Michael Verney with me as ever. We're brought to you by orgaretro.com. If you want to get this class Wexford jersey, maybe that excellent Mead one there, go to orgaretro.com, use the promo code OurGame. You will get 15% off. Just a reminder to anyone who regularly watches the channel, or if you're getting more and more into your GA, please do subscribe to the channel. So hit that button in the bottom right-hand corner if you're watching on YouTube. It's absolutely free to do so, and it helps the channel grow. Also, patreon.com/OurGame. That's the place that you get the audio podcasts, and also, again, a great way to support the channel as we try to build. Michael Verney, plenty going on over the weekend. I was even just thinking, just even outside of GA, or even outside of hurling, the things that are happening this weekend, like Tyrone beat Kerry, that was massive. Even the Mead Miners, the way they won with the young lad for Tyrone, I mean, I felt so sorry watching him miss the free from the 21 that would have levelled it and taken it to extra time. Jake Paul beat Tyrone Woodley. Leo Messi debut for PSG. You were at the Camogie semi-finals. The golf playoff last night between DeChambeau and Cantlay was class. Jeez, it's some weekend.
Yeah, even Ronaldo going back to United. I have limited interest in soccer, being honest with you, but that even sparked my interest again. There was a lot of mad kind of things happening over the weekend. Funnily enough, Shane, I get a lot of abuse on this channel about my hair. And I it's kind of water off a duck's back, to be honest with you, most of the time. But we were playing over in O'Connor Park the other day, and the first hurling all-star, I let you figure out who it was, but the first ever hurling all-star said to me, "Hey, Verney, you may get a haircut. You're going around like a hippie." So that was Damien Martin of St. Rhinus, obviously an Offaly legend, but I probably take his opinion a bit more to heart maybe than most other people, so I am considering a bit of a trim over the next couple of days.
Is he overly fashionable or something like that? Is that why you're taking it so to heart?
No, not really. Just when someone like that says something like that to you, maybe you're just like, maybe he's right, maybe it's gone a bit too far, maybe it is a bit too wild.
But I can't necessarily feel too sorry for you. Last night you were giving me back one of the Orga Retro jerseys and you started fat shaming me. I haven't been out to train in about 6 weeks and he started going after the go. So good enough for you. Fair play to you, Damien. Sew it into him altogether. Jeez, with some amount of stuff on this weekend, or even just the last few days, I mean, we had all these great laid plans to talk about a combined 15 of Kilkenny 2008, Limerick 2021. We want to do that today. We wanted to talk about the Wexford management situation, but then the Liam Cahill situation broke. And so did our best laid plans. We barely even got through the All-Star 15 team, the team that we picked. But it's definitely worth talking about what happened in Wexford over the weekend. A penalty shootout between Naomh and St. Martin's means that there's going to be a playoff for relegation between both Martins and Owlert, which is fairly, when you think of two fairly prestigious clubs that have been winning county titles regularly in recent times, that's a bit of a mad one. To do it in penalty shootouts.
Yeah, and it's just such a lottery when it does get to that stage, and anything can happen. Obviously, Naomh won their first county title a couple of years ago. Were beaten in the county final last year. The fact that they were playing Martins in such a big game, it's a massive game. There are two teams that are in the top three at least to be winning the Wexford title every year. So obviously, John Myler's St. Martin's side came out the wrong side of that, and now he's facing up against Liam Dunn in that relegation final, and it's just a massive big hitter, like it's going to go down. You'd probably you'd be favouring Martins to win that game, but it's funny when things start going against you how difficult it can be to turn around. And if you look at it last year, based on just last year's form, Owlert got to the Wexford semi-final last year. The Martins were beaten in a quarter-final by Glenbarntown. So you'd be foolish to write off Owlert considering some of the big, when they were eventually written off, they beat G in the Leinster final, having been favourites so often. So they're going to be underdogs coming into that game, but that's going to be real interesting. And it's a bit of a disastrous couple of years for Martins. Like, they would have been, some lads would have stopped playing football just to focus on hurling maybe, and now they're kind of not winning either of them. So it's a bit of a fall from grace for them.
Yeah, and there was a bit of context sent in by John S. on Twitter. I'll bring it up on screen there. So he says that, lads, there's a sensational story from Wexford draw tonight. 2 teams being relegated as 13 and senior due to COVID. There was no relegation. One of those 2 teams would be either St. Martin's, who lost out after penalties to Naomh tonight, or Owlert, which is obviously what we were just talking about there. But actually, you mentioned Glenbarntown, and we've been trying to look at who might become Wexford manager. Glenbarntown, their coach is Jason Ryan, who was, people will remember, he was the man who led them to the All-Ireland semi-final in football in 2008 over that great Wexford team that had the likes of Matty Ford and plenty of Red Barry and a few other brilliant players like that. He's one of the names that's come up. We know that Dara Egan, who's Tipperary coach, that he was spoken to. I think they approached Willie Maher. There's a few names flying around there. I wonder even, some of the old great names from Oulart. I wonder have they been spoken to? Henry Shefflin, Saoirse Bulfin is someone that you said might also be in contention. He's been involved with Davy Fitz, of course.
Yeah, well, that would bring continuity. Obviously, it would be Saoirse Bulfin's first kind of inter-county managerial gig, but I remember speaking to him a couple of years ago, and it is something that he wants to get into. I've heard categorically, Shane, that they do not want, this is categorically, I've heard it, they do not want a Kilkenny man managing them. And that's just, and I do think that's just from the point of view of they're great rivals, in particularly over the last while. And I understand that they will not be dipping into Kilkenny for their next manager. That's what I've heard categorically.
And why, you were told that categorically. What was the reason?
Basically to do with the rivalry between the two, and how, I suppose, how closely matched they are now. They don't, from what I'm hearing, they don't feel like it would be a prudent move to go to Kilkenny. I believe there's plenty of other places they will go, but from what I'm hearing, Kilkenny is not one of them.
Well, isn't this a problem shared then by both Tipperary and Wexford? Because if you're going to be insular about things, then you have to see who is the manager that we can get to take it over. In most companies, the whole idea is who is the best person, male or female, that we can get for the job. Whereas now they're lowering the pool to who is the best native we can get to the job. And they might actually be shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, Liam Cahill's obviously out of the equation for Tipperary. So then where do you go? Yeah,
it's a very difficult one. If you look at the Tipperary management team for 2019, 20 and 2021, so you have Eamon O'Shea, who's a former Tipperary manager, Tommy Dunn, who's a former Tip coach and obviously was a coach for that team for 3 years.
Yeah, 2011 and 12.
Yeah. So you have Dara Egan, obviously, who was a coach there. You have Owen Kelly, who was cutting his teeth at that kind of level. So I don't know whether they're looking to go outside of that group. If they are, the talent pool is severely limited. Michael Ryan is the only other one. Michael Ryan and Declan Ryan obviously are both former Tip managers as well. I don't know if either would be interested or either will come into the equation. Colin Bonner is a name that I've heard floated by a couple of people. I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if he got the Tip job at this stage of the day. But it's going to be interesting. Willie Maher is another one who's been talked about as well. There are plenty of names, but the fact that it doesn't look like they're going to be looking outside Tip, I just cannot see them looking outside Tip. It's not something that's been done before. I can't see it being done now. And they'll go with probably someone maybe a bit younger to steer maybe in a different direction. But it's going to be really interesting to see what way to go. On the Wexford side of things, the candidates jumping out off the page in Wexford they just don't seem to be there. JJ Doyle would be the obvious one who was involved with Davy. Haven't heard his name really mentioned in that Brett yet. And there
he has the under 21 success, obviously.
Yeah. And Jason Ryan, who we'd obviously associate with Wexford, is from Waterford. So it doesn't look like there's any outstanding native candidates kind of jumping out there either. It's so interesting, though, because there's so many names in the mix for so many counties. It's just like, it's not like 1, 2 or 3. It's like 7 or 8 in all these different counties. And the fact that Liam Cahill is staying with Waterford potentially opens up all kind of avenues in Tipperary as well. I've heard Brendan Cummins' name being mentioned. I've heard Nicky English's name being mentioned. You hear all sorts kind of moving around now, but it's going to be interesting to see where they go, because the direction of Wexford and Tip in particular it's just so important who the next person at the helm is.
What do you think of this notion of having a name as being over the team? So this is something I think we talked about when the Liam Cahill news broke last week, that he was staying with Waterford, and actually, you know what? There's kind of pressure on him now to deliver or kick on again. If they take a backward step, it'll be like, geez, what went on? Was there issues in house? I mean, has this whole situation with Tipperary kind of put a fly in the ointment? But just in terms of having a name, do Wexford have had as big a name as there is in hurling, which is Davy Fitz? And now are you going to get another figurehead taken over? John Myler, of course, is a name that might even come into the conversation. He's been manager of Cork, but he is, of course, a native of Wexford and played for Wexford. So obviously the roots are there, and the St. Martin's link, because he's managed them. But just the notion of a name, because even just because of the way things have panned out in Tipperary as well as Wexford, Tipperary will probably feel like, damn, we need to go with a name here. And, this is something we saw with the Ireland soccer team when we got a world-class management team in Bobby Robson and Steve Staunton. And, this notion of a name will paper over a lot of cracks. It'll placate people. So, like, for Tipperary, if they're not a name per se, and Brendan Cummins might be the biggest name of those people that you have listed there, will the person coming in be behind the eight ball? They're not going to be the kind of favourite son of Tipperary. They're not going to be like the public's choice. They could still be brilliant, but they're kind of behind the eight ball.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult one. I think if, regardless of how big of a name it is, if it's about, to me, it's about the right person. It's not so much about the name.
But you do that in Offaly. I mean, obviously, you've had some managers who were brilliant and some who weren't, but you're willing to go outside. It's not something that bothers you.
No, it's always been, if you look at 81 and 85, Dermot Healy was the de facto manager in 81 and 85. Obviously, Kilkenny native. Eamon Cregan was there in 94. Babs was there in 98. And then Michael Bond was there in 98. If you look at the last couple of managers outside of Kevin Martin and Brian Whelan, you're looking at Kevin Ryan, Eamon Kelly, Michael Fenley. We've never had any problem there. I think it's a proudness in a lot of the traditional counties. Like, look at Cork. Cork have never gone outside of Cork. Look at Kilkenny, they've never gone outside of Kilkenny. Look at Tip, they've never gone outside of Tip. Galway have gone outside of Galway. Wexford have gone outside of Wexford. Waterford have John Milan always says to me that he always thinks it's better to have an outside manager in Waterford for whatever reason. He just thinks it seems to inside managers, he just finds it maybe it's a bit too not clicky, but he prefers to have an outside voice, and he would have had an outside voice nearly throughout all of his career. But it's just funny when you look at the big three and then you look at the rest. The big three tend to stay in-house. And even like if you look at, I was only thinking the other day about the captaincy rules in Tipperary have only finally changed recently. They're still the same in Kilkenny. They're pretty much still the same in Kerry football, or are changing at the moment. It's hard to kind of usurp or change a tradition. Whereas in the outside counties where maybe there's been less success, they're more willing to change and more willing to take a chance, and there's less of a, I don't know, is it pride the word? But they've no problem in rolling the dice at all.
Yeah, so plenty of comments coming in, and as ever we want them in. P-Well74, who I always suspect is a Patrick's well man. Good to see the colour back in your cheeks there, Shane. You were more rattled than the Cork full backline. He's obviously referring to the Liam Cahill story breaking last week. I mean, that absolutely rocked me to my core.
We did. Someone got onto us on Twitter there, and they were basically saying it was like that Thierry Henry, Jamie Carragher moment, where it's like the shock and the hand goes out. That's essentially what it was like. Yeah, and your all-star selection thereafter, I think you would have just phoned in 13, 14 and 15 after hearing that.
But the heart wasn't in it. I didn't care at that stage. So that might explain some of the crazy selections, and allowing you to bring Tony Kelly back into the team, even though you'd said after the semi-final he wasn't in it then. We definitely can't bring him back in.
You hadn't the stomach for the fight at that stage.
Oh, I was bet. I was done at that stage. Popo says Derek McGrath all day for Wexford. Suits the way they play already. Skills says Nicky English, obviously referring to the tip job. Patrick Hickey says Brendan Cummins. But
just on Derek McGrath, from everything I understand, he was never in the race and won't be in the race.
Oh, okay, right, okay. Popo says McGrath would bring on Wexford, better manager than Davy, can put the arm around the shoulder. Sure, this is always a question. Is the arm around the shoulder the right thing? Derek McGrath got Waterford to an All-Ireland final and took them from a place where they weren't necessarily looking like they contend for an All-Ireland to a position where they did. Obviously, then there was a couple of years where it didn't happen for them. But Liam Cahill comes in and he's considered a more uncompromising sort, and they get to a final again, and they're probably number 2 team in the country. So, the arm around the shoulder, it works for some and maybe not for others. It's probably not just down to that and that alone. There's many other factors in there. Just a reminder to people to follow us there on YouTube. Hit the button in the bottom right-hand corner. That would make an awful lot of difference in terms of the channel growing. So look, comment in here from Flash. Some fierce bad luck for two brothers in Mike and Peter Casey to be getting cruciates in the space of less than a year. It actually made me think of Porrick and Philip Mahoney both getting those bad leg breaks. And of course, both of them did come back for that. So hopefully those two lads can do the same. Andrew Johnson adds, what do you make of a few departures from the Limerick backroom team? Was it inevitable with the success they were going to have that high-level individuals getting poached? So I think obviously the person that they're referring to there is Mikey Kiley.
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I believe he's been juggling duties with Ulster Rugby and Limerick over the past couple of months, and at the end of the day, Ulster's a professional environment where like that's going to be his job now. But they do have previous. Obviously, Joe O'Connor was with them in 17 and 18 and left at the end of 18, and then Mikey Cahill came in, and obviously while they were beaten by Kilkenny in 19, it's been fairly seamless since. So it'd be interesting to see who comes in there. Probably a couple of guys not too, that maybe even someone like Carver O'Carolan, who has worked in Tipperary and worked with Limerick underage squads before, could come in there, but they won't be short of options. The Peter Casey injury is very, very unfortunate for him. I think by the time they got to the middle of the week and before they got him scanned, I think they thought it had improved a small bit and it wouldn't be as bad as they had first initially thought, which was the cruciate. But they got the bad news on Friday, I believe. That's 9 months minimum. Like that's 9 months from now. So we're looking at, if he gets operated next week, we're looking at, first week in June as 9 weeks on. So like it wouldn't be a stretch to say that he's going to be under pressure to play in the 2022 championship. That's just the nature of it. And we saw this year, like me and you both, debated, like Peter Casey. I know it didn't turn out that way, but Peter Casey missing for the All-Ireland final to me could have been a game changer. And now they're like, this is just going to be a chance for Cathal O'Neill, David Reedy, Pat Ryan, whoever it is, to nail down a starting spot. Graham Mulcahy, if he stays on, to nail down a starting spot. But again, Limerick will be going deeper into the reserves now, earlier in games. So it's going to be interesting to see what way they worked at. Last year, obviously, with Mike Casey being out, they just rejigged the team a small bit and moved a few of the pieces of the puzzle around. So going to be interesting to see what they do there. But Peter Casey, he's only 24. You would be expecting him to definitely bounce back, and I'd be fairly certain he's going to get an All-Star after a brilliant season as well. But a bitter one for him to take.
Yeah, he's a class player. I always go back to 2017 when Limerick lost both of their games that season under John Kiley in his debut season. And Casey scored, I think it was 3 points. This is just top of my head. I think he scored 3 points at Nolan Park that day. When I thought Limerick, they were up against the Kilkenny team that I felt that day were there for the take. And Limerick, I thought, were poor. I remember Kiley saying afterwards that it was like a huge battle or like some performance. And I was thinking, that's not what I just saw there. But Casey was a player that really, really stood out that day, even though his team weren't exactly anywhere near the ebb that they got to the following season. Like you're saying about, like Caroline Curd is another one. She's after joining Munster Rugby. So again, you're seeing that correlation. Like Peter Donnelly went to Ulster GAA before. Now you're talking about Mikey Kiley going up to Ulster, and you're talking about Caroline Curd going over to Munster GAA or Munster Rugby. So it remains to be seen whether she stays involved with Limerick. Maybe there can be a bit of double jobbing involved. Munster are probably based, maybe they do a lot of their stuff in UL, and maybe Limerick hurlers are doing something similar there as well. So maybe they can be rejigged. By the way, as you were talking about Mike Casey there, we know what a great player he is and how good he was when he came back in 2018 and spoiled Johnny Glynn and all that kind of stuff in the All-Ireland final. When he comes back now, he'll probably be playing a slightly different position, assuming he gets back into the team, than he would have been before. If he comes back, maybe he'll have to be a ball-carrying fullback. Maybe it'd be like what Barry Nash has been doing, or maybe he will be the stopper closest to goal. I would say Sean Finn will remain as one of the two that stays closest back. Then Dan Morrissey, he could go to the half back line, maybe stay fullback. And if you're playing that fullback, maybe you won't be too much of a ball carrier. But maybe the game has slightly changed since Mike Casey's even been out there in such a short space of time.
No, it looks like it has. It looks like Limerick have definitely changed it even more. They definitely accentuate the short passing more. They definitely accentuate the ball carrying even more. I suppose there's still a question mark about whether he's going to be able to get back to that level again, and let's hope that he does. If he does, he'd offer them another big option there. It's funny, like Mike Casey's only about 5'9", 5'10" max, I'd say, and like he's a really good kind of fullback. Wasn't no problems in the air or anything like that. I hope he gets back. I obviously hope the two of them get back. Mike is still out, going to miss the first couple of rounds of the Napier-Sheets campaign in the Limerick Senior Championship. So hopefully get back and play a bit. He's played very little, even since the All-Ireland final in 2018. If you put all the games together that he's played, it's very little. So hopefully he can get back. Hopefully the two of them can get back. But again, it's going to be a big loss for Napier-Sheet for over the coming months as well. They've still got a really, really talented squad, a really deep squad. But missing Mike Casey even for the first couple of rounds, I think they're playing Kilmallock in the first game as well, which isn't a great way to start. And they're going to be missing Peter as well for the whole of the campaign too. So it's definitely leveled the playing field in the Limerick Championship as well.
Yeah, and that'll be a very competitive championship there, no doubt about. But the depth that Na Piarsaigh have means that they're never going to be too far away. And you know what? I'm very interested to see how Patrick's well kick on this year. I mean, talk about having a serious spine to the team in Burns, Keane Lynch, and Aaron Gallan in there. If they have the right pieces around them, and we've seen the likes of Kevin O'Brien in there, a few other very good players that I'm sure they'll be looking at. Can we get a Munster title? Assuming you can get over in the Piarsaigh, then they'll probably feel like maybe they can make a burst, because who else has that sort of absolute top of the ground star quality at the moment? They're up there. Jim, by the way, I just want to mention the latest with Brian Lohan and Clare. So there was an article in the Clare Champion yesterday. On Monday evening, Clare GA moved a step closer to end the fears of supporters when Clare County Board officers agreed that Lohan would be offered a 3-year term as senior hurling manager, and the recommendations will be approved by a full meeting of Clare County Board, but Lohan is content with the decision. So, I mean, that's an article I'm seeing that went up last night. So it is hugely important that they get that business done very quickly, as it is for every county that currently doesn't have a manager sorted for the next year.
Yeah, I listened to the whole Clare FM interview with him, and even with the chairman last week. What day it was, Tuesday or Wednesday, I think. He seemed quite happy. He had essentially looked for a 3-year commitment, and they had given him that 3 years. So, as we said, Peter Duggan is back with Clooney Quinn. Shane O'Donnell is back with Erogue. There'll be two massive lads if they can get both of them back into the fold again. I just think I wasn't sure if they would be, but I think tactically they were very astute this year. And I know Sean Flynn said, I think he said about Clare parking the bus. And they do to some extent. They really shut up shop at the back and then try and build it out. But they're, tactically they're probably better versed than I thought they would be. And they're in a better position after these 2 years probably than I thought they would be as well. So Lohan definitely looks like the man to lead them forward. And just from chatting to Clare people on the ground, they just want him to get everything thrown at him that he needs to get them to the next level. Been beaten by Cork by a score would suggest they're not a million miles away and could be in around the semi-final kind of places if they can kick on. So good that they have business done relatively quickly. There's other counties that would take their right hand off to have their everything sewn up and know what direction they're going in for next year, because there's so much flux around the place at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, Tipperary, no one really knows. I mean, outside of the county board, I'm sure they're having meetings or whatever, but no one fully knows what's going on. And, the details of those meetings that happen between the county board officers and Liam Cahill, and I presume Mikey Bevans is in there too. It's Bevans, not Bevans, by the way, people. I'm just very concerned about, it was only the start of, the time frame was little more than a week between the time, as far as I know, the information I have, between the time that there was the first communication between the county board and Liam Cahill to pretty much the time that he put out his statement. And the jarring word that jumped off the page, I think, for most people I've spoken to, is the word loyalty. So obviously he wasn't given the job a couple of years before that, despite all the success with the underage teams. So I just wondered, how does it break down that quickly? That in the space of a week, they probably met once, maybe twice, maybe at someone's house, whatever way it worked out. And that it can break down that quickly and all culminate in a statement. That just suggests that, obviously it finished up with bad blood, but somewhere in the middle, did everyone come in thinking we're going to find the right little, we're going to meet halfway on a load of stuff here, we're going to give concessions where they need, because both sides knew that this needed to happen and it didn't. So were people coming in with the wrong mind frame, the wrong attitude, basically thinking I'm not going to be told what's going to happen here with Tipperary hurling on both sides? That's a big concern for me.
I wonder as well what was the attitude of Tip board officials. They should have still been trying to woo Liam Cahill to some extent. It wasn't, you know what I mean? It wasn't science being delivered. He was with another county. He had to be lured away almost, I would say. And it doesn't look like from that statement that he was lured away anyway. And I don't exactly know what happened behind closed doors. But on the flip side of that, then he's obviously staying with Waterford for a third year. He's had 2 really good years, in championship action. They've beaten Cork. They've beaten Kilkenny, they've beaten Galway, they've beaten Tip, they've beaten, all of the top teams outside of Limerick, really. But there's a bit of pressure on them next year now that maybe hadn't been. Well, to be fair, there was pressure on them this year to back up the All-Ireland final appearance in 2019. But while it's a great boost for Waterford, I'm sure, and a really good. What way would you say it? It's a really good confirmation of where they are and the faith that management have in them. But there's also a little bit of pressure now, and I believe they're down to play Tipperary in the first round of the Munster round robin next year, which is just written in the stars almost as well. But I from what I gather, the conversation we had last Thursday, where it was kind of like, will Tip people forgive or forget? I haven't got that sense from the reaction to it that Tip people are disappointed that Cahill isn't the manager, but I don't sense that anger towards him or anything. That's definitely the sense I get anyway. I don't. That's not the overriding thing. It might be there, but I think there's a lot more people maybe questioning decisions maybe that happen behind the scenes.
I'm not sure everyone agrees with that, because what I keep hearing is on the Premier Review forum, there's quite a bit of I would say ill will towards Liam Cahill at the moment. Now, a lot of people are very different when they're on the keyboard versus when they're in person. So we'll see how that manifests itself. Like in the 2022 National Hurling League, Tip and Watford are on the same side of things. So I'm not sure I don't think the draw has been made for that just yet. So it'll be interesting now if that was in Thurles. The league game last year was in Walsh Park. Be interesting if the opening round of the league was Tipperary against Watford inside in Thurles, and he's coming out under the stand. And will anything tasty be said? Will it be a fractious game? God knows what will happen. But there's a question.
Can I just say something to you about these discussion forums? Do people people putting their names to all these comments, or is it Yahoo 54 and this?
Mostly it's that sort of crack.
Yeah,
I mean, your hair gets slaughtered by people who don't even have the good sense to put their names up with it. They're not even brave enough to say who they are.
I've no problem. I've no problem if anyone does put their name to it. It's only a bit of crack. But that kind of thing of gutting different players and gutting management and this kind of crack, because I would have been on the receiving end of that plenty of times in Duvalia.com website, and people are very quick just to slate you about X, Y, and Z, and they wouldn't say boo to you if you met them on the street. Like, so yeah, those discussion forums are an absolute cesspit in my opinion.
Yeah, Flash says, am I the only one who thinks Clare could be in with a shout for Munster this year? I presume you mean 22. I think they're number 3 right now behind Limerick and Waterford. Tip and Cork could struggle after those gut punches. That's an interesting point. We're going to do a top 10 county, well, top 11, I suppose, the pecking order of counties fairly soon, a hurling power rankings. And that'll be an interesting one. We might do that one on Thursday if people have an interest in it. Because
it's a joke, Shane, how strong Munster is going to be next year and how interesting it's going to be. Like, it's every game. You cannot, like, apart from even some of the Limerick games, you're obviously going to be favouring Limerick. Would you be that shocked if, they were beaten a couple of times in Munster next year? Outside of Limerick, all the other teams you think could beat each other on a given day. It's so interesting.
Can I float? Look, I know how this is going to sound, but next year is it going to be harder to win Munster than it is to win an All-Ireland?
Yeah, potentially, to be honest with you. I think
because only 3 get out of Munster. Okay, so let's say Limerick win Munster next year. Going on form, they'll win Munster next year. They'll have their 4 group games, and then they'll have to win a final. So that's all against the Munster teams, who you could argue are stronger than most of the Leinster teams, if not all of the Leinster teams at the moment. To win an All-Ireland, if you came through as champion, you have to play possibly one non-Leinster team or one non-Munster team in a semi-final, then obviously the final. Whereas you might have to play 5 Munster teams to win Munster.
Yeah,
so that's where I'm coming at.
You'll just want to survive Munster, won't you? You'd be delighted. You'd grip onto that 3rd place.
Yeah, so to me, it's a bit of a waste in a way that next year we could have the provinces having all the big clashes, and then we're missing out on them for the All-Ireland series. Remember I talked before that play Munster, play Leinster, then merge the 2 tables together and have Tip play Kilkenny, Galway, etc., etc., etc. Have Kilkenny play Cork, Waterford, Clare, etc., etc. Do that merged table and then have a knockout at the very end of that. But look, that's probably not going to happen. Either way, there's a couple more comments I want to throw in here before we go on to a few other things. Corkness and the arrogance that goes with it is actually stopping Cork progressing. Pádraig Gill, look at Liam Sheedy. He was able to combine the arm around the shoulder with the kick in the arse. Horses for courses. And do you see John Kiely staying on another few years if Limerick win next year? Do you think he'll pack it in? What do you think?
Like, I don't know that I do know that it's very demanding, obviously, behind the scenes, and what we're seeing is just match day and all that. He's obviously got a busy job in the Abbey there as principal too, but it seems like Obviously, two of his most trusted lieutenants have been maybe taken away from Mikey Kylie's definitely gone. We're not sure about Caroline Curd. Replacing those two with, making a seamless transition for the two people that replace them is huge. But it is so time consuming. But he doesn't look like a man. He's never looked to me, jaded or anything like that, or under too much pressure. So I think he's probably in it for the long haul. He just doesn't look like, he doesn't talk about it. I'll put it this way. He doesn't talk about the demands and say how hard it is or anything like that. He talks about it being a pleasure and this kind of thing. And, he's with, a once in a lifetime squad in Limerick. And I think he will try to extract everything possible out of them. I haven't heard a bad word really about anything that he's done or anything behind the scenes. He's nipped any little incidents, that have happened in the bud very, very quickly.
COVID has actually worked out pretty well there. We've seen it with panels before that a team wins their first All-Ireland and they go a little bit lula off the field. And COVID was bad for everybody, but it just keeps lads indoors for a year, actually. So in a sort of a perverse way, that has, had some sort of a positive impact for them. But I know how that can sound.
I don't think COVID is obviously really demanding, don't get me wrong as well. But, at least there were breaks in there. You're obviously still planning and doing Zoom things and whatever. But I do think, particularly for a squad that know each other well and they know how things run, I'd say there would have been times over the last couple of years where he's been able to recharge. And he obviously, being a teacher or being a principal, having the summer off somewhat or having 5 or 6 weeks off at least would help a lot. But I think Kylie's in it for the long haul, I have to say.
Good question here from Skills. What do you make of the rules of under-20s being tied to senior teams? So we saw that this year. Alan Connolly and Shane Barrett couldn't line out for the Cork under-20s. I really didn't like it at all. Mostly these games are played midweek. Sometimes they're played at weekends or whatever. Surely there's a way to sort of play one of these under-20 games midweek if needs be, if there's going to be a situation. Because most of them are never going to be starting. So are Alan Connolly and Shane Barrett held back this year? Was their progress held back this year because they weren't playing enough games when they clearly should have been?
Yeah, potentially, yeah. And they're looking at the under-20 success, a week after the All-Ireland senior final hammering, and they're thinking, well, we didn't get to play in that. We got a few minutes in this. And now the season is totally deflated when we probably should have been playing in this unbelievable success. I just don't think it's fair to deny guys like that. I know the burnout question will always come up, but that's, I think nowadays that's a thing that can be managed an awful lot more, and lads are more willing to put their hand up and say no. And I think, to be honest with you, you have managers who think a little deeper about it and would think we can't be flogging this guy. The short term is not worth it. The long term is more important. And I think it can be a lot better managed now than it would have been in the past.
Yeah, Patrick Coleman.
Look at a county like us, awfully, Shane. It's not going to hurt you as much, but it would hurt us an awful lot if we had a lad playing senior at 19, which we invariably would, and then he can't play under 20. It's a disaster for smaller counties, and it's a disaster even for smaller clubs that are been robbed of some players that could be fit to play corner forward for their adult team at the age of 16 or 17.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on board with you all the way on that one. People, get your comments in. Patrick Coleman says Kilkenny will be better next year. Only just missed out in an All-Ireland final, and if Wexford get a good manager, they will be better.
Can I ask you something on that? Did Kilkenny get the bit of luck that Sheedy maybe got in 2008 with a kind of a building team? Like if Tippett ran into Kilkenny in 2008, I'm not saying it would have happened exactly as it did for Waterford, but they could have been on the end of, maybe a tough beating, maybe a 10-point beating. They maybe just weren't ready. Whereas Kilkenny, like Owen Larkin, another Kilkenny player, saying that Kilkenny dodged a bullet with a lot of maybe raw enough young fellas there. They would have maybe taken a bit of a decent defeat in the All-Ireland final. And I thought it would work the other way. I thought maybe Brian Cody would step aside. From what I'm hearing, that doesn't look to be the case. So maybe, if they had been beaten well in an Ireland final, he maybe would be considering his position a bit more. But, because you'd have to after a beating like that.
Yeah, the comments are flying in here. And I have to be honest, they are the kind of thing that make the show in an awful lot of ways. So keep them coming. The Shelminator says, rumours in Nina is Cahill wants to demand to clean house with forced retirements of plenty, like what happened with Noel Connors and obviously Maurice Shanahan. The tip board balked and Cahill walked. So that's an interesting point. Another one coming in here, John O'Sullivan. Do you think Mark Coleman could be effective playing at number 11, playing a similar role to Cian Lynch? I don't know, because Cian Lynch went from starting out, when he first came into the Limerick team, I could picture him wearing the number 15 jersey. Started off as a corner forward, then he goes out to midfield, then centre forward. All of that progression I can see making sense for that type of player. Coleman, I don't know, is he a centre back? Because, you know, I talk to different Cork people and they're like, he's obviously a brilliant ball player. That's not even up for debate. But does he enjoy mark? Do any of those Cork backs enjoy marking people? I think Sean O'Donoghue, you could say he does. Maybe too many of the others are ball players. That's probably a little bit unfair on one or two. Owen Cadigan obviously likes marking lads. But that is an interesting question about Coleman. Could you see him playing centre forward, dropping deep, winning ball? Now, I can't see him snapping puck outs all day like Cian Lynch is capable of doing. I don't know about that one.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make as much sense. I think it could be the sort of thing that might work at club level. But to be able to play,
because they have to make it work. Because often you'd have to do that.
Exactly, and you know, you might have a bit more space. You're not going to have a really well drilled midfield pair and that are snuffing your space out. I just don't think it would be natural, to be honest with you. From what I like, he obviously hits frees and gets forward for Blarney and scores, but I just don't think it would be as natural, to be honest with you. That's just everything I've seen of him. While you mightn't say he's a natural out and out like marker, he definitely has defensive instincts. I don't think he's going to be able to snap a ball, lean back, you know, on his right hand side like Cian Lynch does off either right or left. Like, you know, I just don't think it would be natural.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see it, certainly, though. Mark Corcoran says to Shelminator, sounds like a rumour, all right, that referring to Cahill. I mean, obviously, that is what it is at this stage. Luminatrix, that's how I'm going to pronounce it anyway, Racing, says Coleman is definitely better at 5 or 7 rather than playing at 6. More of a free role, and he's great going forward. Interestingly, against Kilkenny in the semi-final, he played as a sweeper from wing-back because Ger Millerick was following TJ Reid out to centre forward. That mightn't have been as obvious on TV, and obviously with the limited crowd, not too many people would have been there to see it. But there's certainly a big role. Some people would just say midfield straight up. But then, you know, how many natural defenders do Cork have? And people will talk about the young lads coming, but they probably need another 2 or 3 years. I mean, if you look at another 20 now, are you going to throw them in against some of those giants that Limerick have next year? I don't really see that.
Well, Shane, look at how long it has taken, like the likes of Tim O'Mahony and Robert Downey, particularly O'Mahony, who's a big physical specimen. Look how long it's taken to find him a spot and for him to get, you know, accustomed to senior intercounty hurling. I'd say the same with Downey as well. So it's not just going to be this seamless transition, far from it. But they're going to have to go through some tough days and a lot of learning before they're, you know, accustomed to what it takes at that level.
Yeah, Mark Corcoran makes another good point. Hannon is a ball player at centre-back, but Limerick have 2 defensive midfielders to help him out. So we did look at that midfield that Cork had in the All-Ireland final. Now, it was named as Dara Fitzgibbon, but realistically, it was Conor Cahalane and it was Luke Meade. And you'd nearly more think forward with both of those, or forward-minded. You wouldn't think, I mean, you'd put Will O'Donoghue and Darragh O'Donovan in a very different bracket in terms of what they like to do when they're out in the field and what positions they'll probably take up.
Yeah, they were missing a Bill Cooper, weren't they? They were missing that type of player, that defensive kind of midfielder who would probably sit back and deny Cian Lynch a load of space. Yeah,
okay. Michael John Byrne, my outlook is a lot more downbeat now that Cahill isn't taking over. I'd have been confident of Tip putting it up to anyone with Cahill in charge. Now I feel like that we could struggle. Cork are at least a few years away until these under-20s and minors come through. I actually don't believe that. I think Cork's tactics, I don't know, did people see Tomás O'Shea talking about Kerry against Tyrone on Saturday? He was on the Sunday game last night, and he basically said that they weren't ready. They didn't come, they weren't ready tactically. You know, he kind of looked at what do Tyrone like to do? Sit back when they're defending, break forward at speed when they're going forward. Cork played with a high line. It was, you know, I mean, they left their full back line to the Wolves. They pushed up. They played long ball on top of Horgan and Jack O'Connor at times into like the masses of Limerick numbers. That was never going to work. Kind of reminds you of what Galway did in the second half against Kilkenny in 2015. Just completely bird brain stuff. And, you know,
bird brain. I haven't heard that one in a while.
Yeah, it was bird brain. But like what Cork did, you know, I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, to me, like those inside forwards for Limerick, when they're getting good ball, they're in 50 yards of space. They've great movement. They're really good hurlers, and they're going to punish you. Bit like Tipperary against Kilkenny in 2016, when poor Joey Holden was thrown to the Wolves and Callan had the freedom of the park and Bubbles had the freedom of the park. And did the inside forward line score something like 215 that day from play? Yeah. Something ridiculous. This was something similar again in the sense that they threw the players to the Wolves back there. It was like Per Mertesacker playing like the high line for Arsenal against like Kylian Mbappe or something like that. And you're thinking that somehow he's going to be able to. He's not. So I think if Cork set up in a slightly different way. Now, maybe they're lacking a player or two, the Bill Cooper types, the Will O'Donoghue types, but I think there's definitely a case to be made where Cork can give a much better game to Limerick. They're not going to beat Limerick just yet, but they're not 16 points worse. They're maybe 8 points worse.
It's not gas, like a lot of what Tomas O'Shea said last night probably refers to the Cork hurlers as well. They probably don't have enough dogs, shall we say, enough lads that are willing to do the really, we always talk about, and I always say the word miserable in the best way possible, that real miserable lad who will just, stand in around you, will deny space, will get flicks and hooks and blocks in. Will O'Donoghue is the most, how should we say, he's the nicest version of it, I would say, in that he can do lovely things when he has the ball, but when he doesn't have the ball, everyone saw him doing that diagonal run across, tracking a couple of different Cork men and forcing a wide by Niall Cashman. Cork don't really have many of those players, and I would say Jeremy Elric is one of the few, and when they were missing him for the final, they were in big trouble. They just didn't have a ready replacement, no more than the Kerry defenders didn't have a load of guys that just love this one-on-one thing, that love marking a man, that love the idea of stopping a lad. And like, it's a bit maybe perverse, but like some people, I used to just enjoy, I'd get as much joy out of stopping a fella as I would like touching the ball. Best game I ever heard for Offaly, I don't think I got the ball in my hand, genuinely. But the fella I was marking I think it was Paul Ryan, and he didn't get the ball. He hardly got the ball in his hand either. And everyone said, "Oh, geez, it's some game." And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't actually get the feel the weight of the ball in my hand." Yeah, it doesn't matter though. He didn't touch it or whatever. And that's the way. And like Cork probably need a few more of those guys that are just going to run 50-50 with a lad, break it out to somebody else, and just do none of the flashy stuff, but just do the really, really hard yards. And really good hurlers need those guys to do that hard work, or they won't flourish either. It's grand having like five or six really good forwards that will shoot the lights out, but like, are they all going to win their own ball? Probably not. They need somebody who's going to do a lot of the hard work for them.
Yeah, I'd imagine back in 2007 and 8, I can't remember fully now, but TJ Reid, I doubt he was winning too many turnovers back then. I'd say he was just a pure hurler. Whereas the last few years, he's some man to win ball back. So those Cork players, maybe they need to improve in that aspect. And like we were talking about it in the past year or so, that they have to sort of do things differently. They are trying to do things differently. I think tactically on the line, they threw it away a little bit. But just those players need to go out and win more hooks and blocks. And, I think Owen Kelly and Lara Corbett used to say to each other, we need to get a couple of hooks and a couple of blocks today. And everyone has to go with that mentality, whether you're playing full forward or full back or where you're playing. You just have to have that in your psyche.
I would say, Shane, that Henry Shefflin's one of his best attributes was how good of a defender he was. And the pressure he would put on an opposition player coming out, he was just so good at. And that's kind of what, can separate, the good from the really, really good. Even Cian Lynch as well. He has all the touches, but I'd say he gets as much satisfaction out of getting a turnover or getting his body in as he does putting any ball over the bar, setting up anybody else for a score.
Yeah, and even like some of those Tyrone players over the weekend, battering into Kerry lads.
It was class to watch, wasn't it? There'd be one man, tackling a Kerry man, and then the second there was any danger, there was another two guys in around him, and they just swarmed around him. And it was amazing to think that Kerry weren't ready for that.
Yeah. Just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get this class Wexford jersey, that brilliant Meath one, any of the other ones, just go to OurGameRetro.com. There's a whole selection of jerseys there from all the different counties, and use the promo code OurGame, you get 15% off. A reminder, please do subscribe to the channel, especially if you're watching on YouTube, all the different channels. But if you're watching on YouTube, bottom right-hand corner, there's a subscribe button there. It helps build the channel. YouTube sees more people following, recommends it to other people. It's free to follow. And then also, if you want to follow us on patreon.com/OurGame, you'll get the audio podcast there. It's $5 a month, and again, a great way to support the channel. Let's talk about the Camogie All-Ireland semi-finals from the weekend. You were at Croke Park to see Cork and Galway make it through after beating Kilkenny and Tipperary, respectively.
I was indeed, yeah. I only got in for a bit of the first game, I have to admit. But the second game was an absolute belter in the last few minutes in particular. It's funny, every time, the last couple of years, Cork, Kilkenny, Galway, there's literally no more than a score between them anytime they play. Cork really, really took it to Kilkenny yesterday from the very, very start. It's actually, sometimes not been disrespectful or disingenuous, but when you look at Camogie, you don't see maybe as many parallels with hurling, particularly tactically, But Cork literally played like so similar to the Cork senior hurlers. It was a running game. Their passing was really, really swift. There was always women running off the shoulder for a pass. They were always looking for space. Even in tight kind of situations, they were always trying to do the right thing. And they were up 10-5 at half time. Orla Corona missed a free to put them 5 up. And then all of a sudden, Mary O'Connell got a goal. I think it was in the 44th minute. Denise Galp over free. Kilkenny were level. And you're thinking, okay, they finally got a foothold in the game. They haven't been playing particularly well, but they're going to drive on. They went 2 up then. Katie Power got a great score in the 52nd minute, and then they didn't score thereafter. And it was just a real thrilling last few minutes. Cork had a goal chance. Katrina Mackey was... Paddy Murray said after that he thought it was a penalty. And the tackle by Megan Farrell, I thought was a brilliant tackle. But crucially, the ball resurfaced back around, and Fiona Keating, I think it was, put the ball over the bar to put them level. Cronin was then sent off for an altercation with Grace Walsh. She could miss the final now as a result of that. And they're
what do you make of that now? Because I watched it back, and like Grace Walsh burst into her, and I don't know if Grace Walsh meant it, but it was very awkward at the very least. So I could see how Cronin would be very annoyed, but she got up. As far as I was concerned, she did flake the hurley and caught her, because I think you can see Grace Walsh catch her arm and then pushed her. Now, I'm always looking for excuses not to send people off, but she interfered with the face guard, which means that the referee is well within his rights to send her off. But I think whether it's the strike or whether it's the hand, deserved red card as far as I'm concerned.
I think so, yeah. Very, very. I don't think there's that much of a debate about it. I tell you what did impress me was the fact that Cork were able to regroup again, even down to 14. And Linda Collins got the match winning point. She was obviously the captain. She was only brought on in the 58th minute, having been, like, essentially she was dropped. Like, and the reason she was dropped was Paddy Murray said they needed a kick off the bench. She definitely provided them with that. So they hit the last 3 scores, kept Kilkenny scoreless for the guts of the last 10 minutes, and deserved their place in the final. Cronin been out, which I expect she will be out. Obviously creates a bit of a conundrum, but Chloe Sigurdsson got 5 yesterday, 4 brilliant points from play, and she was hitting long range frees from yesterday as well. So at least from the free taking point of view, you'd expecting her to step up and hit the ones closer to goal. Galway obviously had a player sent off as well, but that was a bit more.
Dermot Higgins, yeah, wrong identity.
I think so. And there's no way. Like, I don't know how this works now, to be honest with you, with the referee's report. So, like, when is he made aware? I think it was Ray Kelly that was refereeing that game. When is he made aware that, after that, it might have been a case of mistaken identity? If you haven't, even if he wanted to send somebody else off, if you can't send them off retrospectively, it's, whatever punishment is given on the day. So it's going to be interesting. And I think Galway will probably get away with it, I'd imagine. And I think they'll have a full selection for the final. But it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, was it Emma Hillebert or was it Sarah Dervin that was the person who had struck?
Not 100% sure on that. And it's very, very... The footage is very, very far away. It's actually hard to see.
It was a red card, though, but it wasn't Dermot Higgins was the thing. For Tipperary, that's 4 All-Ireland semi-final defeats in a row. So tough to take for the girls there. 113-12 in the wind-up. And there were missed chances towards the end. I mean, Clodagh McIntyre soloed down the centre a few times, like great bursts, and just there either wasn't someone to offload the ball to, or somebody got in a great block for Galway. Aoife Donoghue was brilliant. And then, of course, like, look, it's high-stakes stuff. The camogies on in Croke Park, the TV cameras are there. So it's a tough one for Anya Slattery, letting in that handy goal. A high ball goes in and puts the hurley up to take it down, but ends up in the net. And you can see she's devastated, and she's crying at the end of the game, and it is definitely a tough one to take.
Tipper definitely getting much closer, Shane. It's just so hard to break into that big tree. Like, they like 2 or 3 years ago, they were, a fair distance ahead. Tip should have beaten Kilkenny in the league this year, and they were neck and neck with Galway. Take out that goal and they're beaten by a point. Last year they were beaten by 6 in the semi-final. They're definitely getting closer. It just is a big gap to try and bridge, but they are getting closer. It's hard to take, as you say, with 4 semi-final defeats in a row, but they are definitely getting closer.
Yeah, so that was definitely a tough one to take. Sorry, I think it might have been, was it Quiva Burke actually who was in the goal? Sorry, I might have got the name wrong there. Someone will definitely correct me on that one. Is Grace anything to Tommy? She is sister. Let me just see. let me just see another comment. Cork are some fierce camogie team, arguably one of the greatest Irish sports teams of all time. Maybe the ladies football 2005 to 2014, arguably dominant. And the standard of camogie has gone through the roof in the last 10 years, passing in the tackle, standard of delivery to forwards and defensive now. It's a great watch yesterday. That is true. It's definitely gone on to the next level. And I thought Karen Kennedy, for example, playing centre back for Tipperary was very good. And there obviously was players on both sides who were excellent. Niamh Kilkenny getting on the ball as she always sort of does. A couple of more comments there. People are saying it was Emma Helbert who struck Galway number 6, and Luke would probably get off, but interfering with the helmet. So yeah, and James Maher wasn't Slattery, so it was Caoimhe Burke. So sorry, I got that wrong. Anya Slattery's obviously been in the goals before. So any further point you want to make on the camogie, or shall we move on?
No, it's gas. Paddy Murray definitely has a Kerry gene in him, because he came in straight after and started saying that, that they were going to be up against it. And, a lot of people are saying that Galway's name is written on the trophy and this kind. Like, that's a 50-50 game coming into the final. And to me, if anything, I'd say Cork are favourites going into the final. Obviously we're champions in 17 and 18, beaten by a score in the last 2 semi-finals. There's been a fair transition of players, and they've obviously in recent years, the likes of Breach Corkery and Rena Buckley and even Orla Cotter and a few more are gone. But definitely lots of good young players coming in. Hannah Looney was brilliant at midfield yesterday. Don't know if she was like necessarily, following Grace Walsh around, but she definitely kept her totally out of the game, and she was the one going forward. If anything, I'd be probably just narrowly favouring Cork going into the final. I just think that's a huge win for them. It's in kind of a new squad, and I think they've kind of found their feet now. And the fact that they were able to stick to what they were doing in the most pressurised environment when the game looked to be going away from them, I definitely just give them, narrowly give them the nod in the final. Again, though, there won't be more than a score in it, because there never is between the top 3.
Yeah, we're going to move on to the Tipperary Club Hurling Championship. So the county championship started over the weekend, and I have a clip of one of the goals here. I mean, people will say typical you bringing up Borrislee, but Borrislee beat Roscrea 224 to 15 points. Pretty heavy victory, and a few weeks after a disappointing display in the North semi-final against Killarwan, this was obviously it looked like more of a full-strength team, and obviously exactly what the doctor ordered for Johnny Kelly and co. But here's a clip of a goal from Tip under-20, James Devaney. I'm sure people remember him scoring that goal in the county final a couple of years ago. It's not bad now. It's worth watching. And send in any other clips or any links to any other goals if you've got something good from the weekend.
Half-back line, strikes right up towards JD. JD being pursued by Glenn now, but JD managed to catch the hopping ball off the ground. Now he's showing his pace that we all know he has. JD squares the ball. JD is in for brilliant goal. JD, you'll pay the admission fee for that alone.
Yeah, it's great stuff. The little flick over the head. I'm sure it's happened to you many times over the years.
In fairness now, as bad as I am, I try and make sure that wouldn't happen to me, and I just leave him into the middle of next week and take a card. But JD back. The defender won't like seeing that again now.
Yeah, I mean, the man can go through, the ball can go through, but the two of them cannot go through.
That is the first pass.
Yeah, that is the absolute first and last law. But plenty of tip stuff happened over the weekend. I think you've got a bit of a roundup there if you want to run through.
I do indeed, Jed. It was repeated last year's county final, and by the sounds of things, it was another epic. Killadangan opened the defence of the Dambreen with a 223 to 222 victory over Lockmore. I think it was Dan O'Mara and Sean Hayes got goals. They had them 217 to 17 up at the start of the fourth quarter. But Lockmore, as they do, fought on, and they were just beaten by a point in the end. I actually saw an unbelievable score from Noel McGrath. I think it was the week before as well, scoring. I don't even know how he swung the hurl. It was basically in a phone box, essentially, and he's still able to put it over the bar.
Against Thurles, was it?
Yeah. And Lockmore still obviously still have a big say in where the Dambreen goes at the end of the year. In other games as well, David Young and Darren Delaney, they both got goals as Tumivara beat Holy Cross Ballycattle 220 to 211, and Paddy Creedon hit 3-3 for Thurles SARS. They had a 519 to 123 defeat of Drummond Inch. So we'd kind of said, like, SARS a couple of years ago, when they were beaten in a semi-final, was it by Nina Rogue they were beaten by? I think it was a semi-final. The year Clonalty won it, and I thought Curtis would bounce back the year after, and they didn't. But might be like time for them. Like they've plenty of talent. Obviously the two Mars and the Cattles, and plenty more lads there. Kilruan had a big win as well over Nina Rogue, 126 to 221. Clonalty, obviously the champions in 2018, I think it was. Yeah, they beat Mullinahone 24 points to 115. Owen Kelly still going strong with 9 points. He's some man, in fairness to him. And as you mentioned there, I think Brendan Matter was very good from all reports I'm reading, as Boris Ali beat Ross Gray 24 to 15. And the Brackens beat Mike Harkey Boris 116 to 113. So plenty of action. It's weird trying to get your frame of mind back into club action now, just because the county is still so fresh almost. But there's going to be some amount of action over the next while, hot and heavy everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. As it is at Antrim at the moment. So in Group 1 of the championship there in Antrim, Ballycastle played against Lochgiel. So Lochgiel won 127 to 220. I think I actually have a goal here. Yeah, I'm just going to bring it up here and let people have a little look here. James McNaughton, he scored a goal for Lochgiel. So I'll have a quick look. Not bad. He's a tasty hurler, so you wouldn't put it past him, would you? Yeah, no. So the other results there, Rasa beat Nevena 424 to 211. Group 2 then, Cushendall, they say off St. John's 223 to 116, and Dunloy battered Tiernan Oak 438 to 07. Do you know what? Maurice Shanahan fairly laid the gauntlet down to Liam Cahill, a man we've been talking about already during this show. Scored 413 as Lismore beat Tallow 519 to 119, 311 of those for place balls. And Dan the Man came on for the last 10 minutes, debut in 1993. So he came on at the age of 44. Some yoke.
Imagine you were still able to do it at that age. Like he's still so fearsome coming in around the edge of the square as well. Fairness to Maurice, like some of the scores he's put up for Lismore over the last while. They've obviously got Jack Prendergast is there as well now, which is obviously a huge player for them. And helping the two Shannons an awful lot. But Maurice the scores he's put up for Lismore in recent years, absolutely outstanding stuff. Mad kind of scores, really.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other results there. Patrick Curran scored 112 on Saturday night as Dungarvan beat De La Salle. First time to beat them in Championship hurling, 220 to 116. Michael Kiley also got a goal there. Ballygunner hammered Ballyduff Upper 131 to 110, and they were out without Pádraig Mahoney, Ian Kenny, Tim O'Sullivan and Philip Mahoney, who only came on there for the last quarter. They're now 39 games unbeaten in Waterford, and in their last 50 games there, they've won 48, lost 1 and drawn 1. I mean, that's actually not great for a championship, let's be honest.
No, it's very one-sided now at this stage, and they're so methodical in the way they play. They're going to be so hard to beat. And like, De La Salle have been, close-ish to them. Outside of that, Passage beating them in, I think, the 2013 county final. They've been so dominant, really, either side of that, and they look like they're minimum 6 or 7 points clear of the rest at the moment as well.
Yeah, we're going to pick a combined Kilkenny 2008, Limerick 2021 team here now. It's going to get hot and heavy. It's going to get feisty. We expect the comments to fly in, and our bias is going to show in all directions. Obviously, no doubt.
Just a quick one for you as well. Like, this is Kilkenny 2008. This is Limerick 2021. This isn't what Kilkenny have done since, or it's not what Limerick have done before so much, really. Or what?
We don't want to hear about Kilkenny beating Cork in 2006 with that great, like high press and hunting and packs. That's nothing to do with it. It's 2008 against 2021 alone. Yeah.
That's the way you have to look at it. And like, when we're going to be comparing Cody and Kiley later, this is going to be Brian Cody after, I think this was his 6th or 7th All-Ireland. We're not comparing 11-time All-Ireland winning manager Brian Cody, and we're comparing him to 3-time All-Ireland winning manager John Kiley at the moment. So it's 2008 versus 2001 and those years alone.
Yeah, and people, get your comments in. And not only if you want to tell us who you want in the team, but why, and why they get into a slot ahead of somebody else, because that's sort of crucial here. We can all say, look, you have to put in Henry Shefflin there, you have to put in Aaron Gallan, you have to put, at some stage you're going to have to leave people out. So tell us who's going in, who's not, and why. So it's we'll start off in the goals. You've PJ Ryan and you've Nicky Quaid. Now, would you contend that back then puckouts weren't as difficult or as important as they are now? I mean, they're obviously always important, but PJ Ryan knew pretty much, if I put snow on him here, the ball is going to get won by that half-forward line of the likes of, Owen Larkin, Richie Power, Martin Comerford. Shefflin can come out, he can win one. Whereas now it's far different. But then again, of course, people would say Nicky Quaid can just go short to a free man all the time because the opposition are going to drop off the likes of Harry Nash.
Yeah, you'd love to go back and just look at 2008 and like were like puckouts ever even discussed, like, or was it literally just like hit the ball as far as you can? And I'd say that was the way the approach was. And it's such just even talking about, just to step away from the keepers at the moment, but what they're hitting the ball to, the half forward lines are so similar and are very similar in many ways, in that you can hit down on top of any of the three of them. You're not going to be, while you might be hitting it long, it's not predictable down to the left channel or predictable down the middle. It's wherever you want to put it at a given time. You're not going to be hitting the same man the whole time. PJ Ryan obviously was a brilliant shot stopper. The 2009 performance, obviously, we hadn't seen that yet, so we're only just looking at this in 2008. He wouldn't have played, this would have been one of his first years in the goals, actually starting for Kilkenny. Like Quaid in 2021 has been Limerick goalie for the guts of a decade. Whereas PJ Ryan is a rookie goalie in 2008. Realistically, that's what you have to say that.
Yeah. So look, again, it's difficult to remember the ins and outs of every game from the 2008 season. So I'll just give a quick overview of how it went for Kilkenny that year. Were you playing in that game 224-012, the Leinster semi-final? No, I'm not even trying to sneer.
No, I was. Yeah. Funnily enough, it was my second championship game for Offaly, and that was Richie Hogan's championship debut. He went off after 55 minutes, and who replaced him to make his championship debut? Only TJ Reid.
Yeah. Okay, so they won that game 224-012. I don't think I'm being insulting by saying that wasn't a huge challenge for Kilkenny that day. Then the semi or the final of Leinster, 521 to 17 points. I mean, Leinster was a bit of a joke for Kilkenny for years. They were just walking through and getting ready for an All-Ireland semi-final, while the Munster teams were absolutely battering each other. And then Kilkenny, they obviously got a bite of the All-Ireland semi-final. They beat Cork 123-017, and then in the final 330-113. If I remember correctly, the one goal that was scored against Kilkenny that year, James McGarry was in the goals at that stage. He'd come on late on in the final, am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It was a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, so you'd have to say, in terms of conceding goals, PJ Ryan didn't concede one. Whereas obviously Limerick were breached once or twice this year. I'm pretty sure they were, weren't they?
Limerick were breached once against Cork. Tipperary breached them twice in the Munster final. Waterford didn't get a goal in the semi-final, and Cork beat them once in the final. Was Nicky Quaid at fault for any of them? No. Don't think so, being realistic now either.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pushing. PJ Ryan obviously had a very good year. The quality of the opposition in some of those games for Kilkenny was, far lower. So I'd be pushing for Ryan in this one.
You'd be pushing for Ryan or Quaid?
Sorry, I'd be pushing to give it to Quaid ahead of Ryan.
Yeah, no, I'd be pushing for Quaid as well, in fairness, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's just so calm the whole time as well, just so good on the ball. They know when the ball is in his hand, there's a 70-75% chance of them retaining possession. So Quaid for me, definitely, yeah. Yeah,
so Patrick Hickey's saying here, I'm surprised he isn't trying to put a Clare lad in here somewhere. Sean Finn, Noel Hickey and Jackie Tyrrell. What do you think?
So Mick Kavanagh to me is one of the great cornerbacks, I have to say. He was a brilliant cornerback. I don't ever remember him being in trouble throughout his Kilkenny career. And the only reason he lost his Kilkenny spot was because Loughton's went on a run in the Leinster Intermediate Championship and he just never got back in. So Sean Finn is a brilliant cornerback and has been obviously probably going to get his fourth All-Star in a row. But that's far from a foregone conclusion. Far from it.
Yeah, Michael Kavanagh certainly picked up a number of All-Stars. I'm actually going to try and look it up there. What about the full-back slot?
Noel Hickey was there for so long and was so solid for so long, whereas Dan Morrissey is only he's still a relative rookie at fullback, albeit a brilliant rookie. If Dan Morrissey had more time under his belt, I think he'd have a chance of turning that around. If he was there for the rest of his career, the next 5 or 6 years, and Limerick are still really, really dominant, I think he has a chance maybe of turning that around. But Noel Hickey was just so solid throughout his whole career, realistically.
Yeah, and considering what he'd come back from health-wise as well, I think Noel Hickey definitely gets that full-back slot. So we're agreed on that one anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then with Jackie Tyrrell, I am pushing. I think Michael Kavanagh was very, very good. And I used to work with him back in the bank around this era. So I would be sort of pushing towards him a little bit. But like Sean Finn has been so good. He was so good all season. He's just very, very dominant. I know a couple of scores came off him early in the All-Ireland final. But, he's not far off man of the match in a few games. I don't know if Kavanagh was more of a stopper, whereas obviously Finn is that, but he's kind of driving out with ball too and putting the team on the front foot from inside his own 21.
Yeah, Kavanagh just going through his honours here. 10 Leinster titles, 8 All-Irelands, 5 leagues, 4 All-Stars. It's a fair body of work. And if anything, Verney pushing for KK where possible. We're talking about two of the greatest teams that have ever played here. There's no foregone conclusion here. Finn is a brilliant player, and the only thing I would say is Finn offered something a bit different maybe than Kavanagh did, in that Finn will work the ball out and could go for a return pass as well. Listen, I would be favouring Finn, but I just think it was not a foregone conclusion. Michael Kavanagh is one of my favourite hurlers, I have to say, having looked at. Obviously, it was the year after, but it was his little kind of slide out over the sideline in 2009 to set up that goal that basically helped turn the tide as well. But it's not I'll agree with John Finn, but it's 60-40, I would say. It's not the 80-20 or 90-10 that people are saying.
Oh, obviously not. Definitely not. I'd agree with you on that front. All right, so Jackie Tyrrell obviously had a very good... Well, look, he had many, many good seasons for Kilkenny. But it's a very different role. So this is the difficulty in trying to compare them. Nash was probably sweeping, holding the shapes only at times, and then obviously bringing out the ball a nice bit. He got a point from play also. So it's kind of a difficult one to compare the two roles. It's definitely not like for like.
You're reminding me of, I forget what soccer coverage it was, but they go to Liam Brady and ask him about something. He just says, he plays a different role, Bill. Just like they are two completely different roles. Tyrrell bombed the ball down the pitch, and whereas Barry Nash is a runner, can obviously score from distance and go forward as well. It's amazing how positions have changed over the years, but Jackie was never caught out really at cornerback, not in any big games really. And if you look at it as well, Barry Nash is a 2-season rookie at cornerback. Jackie Tyrrell have been playing there. In fairness, now I would say this as well. Jackie Tyrrell is probably only there 3 years at that stage. Would be right in saying 06 was his first year, so 06, 07, 08. So when you look at it, that's not a foregone conclusion as well, even though Jackie Tyrrell has had the better career so far and has achieved an awful lot more. But you're looking at a guy who played cornerback for 3 years at that given time against a guy who played cornerback for 2 years. Yeah,
Nisha Waldron made a good point there. Finn is often in the discussion for hurler of the year. No other cornerback has ever really been in that kind of group. I think Cahill Barrett was in 2016 for most of that season, to be fair. And I do feel that there's got to be one or two other cornerbacks that have been in that discussion. Jackie Tyrrell did win his second All-Star that year. Actually, the entire Kilkenny, from 2 to 5, they all won All-Stars. As well, look, a huge amount from one All-Stars that year. So what way are you leaning towards here? Playing a very, very different type of game. I'm trying to even remember who Tyrrell marked in that All-Ireland final that year. Would he have marked...
John Milan.
John Milan.
Milan was one of the few Waterford players. I remember reading Jackie's book after, and he took it very hard, I think, looking at the ratings for the final after. Because Milan, I think, it got 3 points in that game. Jackie was still very good. But I remember saying he was talking about his mindset and basically how he took it very, very hard. He took it very, very hard that, it was a perfect performance, essentially, aside from him. But that he was being overly harsh on himself, in fairness.
Okay, well, we haven't seen Barry Nash say anything like that about himself, and we're trying to, it's very tough to separate two. Do we go and take that? I don't know. As you said, John Milan did get 3. Nash, he was free at times, but
no, come on now. We can debate it up and down, but Jackie is still marginally ahead. Even I'm saying he was only on the Kilkenny team 3 years, but he obviously been hovering around the panel for a few years before then, and he was an out and out cornerback. Fair enough, the gap isn't as big maybe as people would think, but it's probably still Jackie marginally heading that one.
Okay, I'm curious to see if people agree with that, because it's a team that got absolutely annihilated and only scored 113, and 3 of those was for Milan. So I mean, on the other side of it, you have Barry Nash, who's driving the team the other way forward. But he is kind of playing at times as a spare man. So, do you know what? It's the tougher job for Tyrrell that day. So I'm gonna, for a finish, I'm gonna agree with you there.
In the heel of the hunt.
In the heel of the hunt. You know, I actually, you knew I was about to say it there. I did stop myself right at the last moment. Let's see the comments coming in agreeing. I go for Jackie, to be fair. Nash was put in there as emergency choice after injuries, even though he's done very well. Jackie for sure, says Andrew Sullivan. And Anisha adds, sorry, maybe Ollie Canning might have been in and around the hurler deer talk as a cornerback. Has to be Jackie over Nash. Defender's going to defend. And Milan scored 3 points when Kilkenny took the handbrake off. Jeez,
he was also gone out to pitch, in fairness, and he'd admit that himself. He said there was no way he was standing in corner forward, so he drifted out to pitch. But technically, the scores were off Jackie.
And Ben Judge adds, Milan probably thought he was roasted too with that score. Now let's go into the half back line. It's Diarmaid Byrnes against Tommy Walsh. Christ almighty! I mean, Tommy Walsh won Hurler of the Year in 2009. That's not to say that I'm saying 2008 wasn't a very, very good season for him. Of course it was. But his highest watermark was 2009 for my money. What do you think?
Yeah, it was. He was getting there in 2008. He'd been so consistent. Obviously, was it 9 All-Stars in a row in different positions. There's like, look at the half back lines, and there's just I think when you compare the two teams, the half back line and the half forward line is what really, really resonates. Actually, probably, to be fair, from 5 to 12, you just have a half back line that is impossible nearly to penetrate on both sides. And you have a half forward line that can all win their own ball and can all score from distance. And you have 2 worker bees in the middle of the field. Like, it's sometimes we probably overcomplicate hurling a bit. At the end of the day, the half back line to me is still the most important line in the pitch, bar none. Because if you can't get past that half back line, you can have the dandiest forwards inside. They just won't get the ball. But like Walsh versus Byrnes, Tommy would have played his first final in 2003, so has a fair body of work under his belt at this stage. And like Tommy was always delivering 8.5s at this stage as well. Like he was just... Yeah, like I suppose maybe more. There was more highlight reel catches maybe than Diarmaid Byrnes, but Diarmaid Byrnes is catching him, I would say, but he's not there yet.
It's Tommy. It is Tommy. Look, you and I both rate Byrnes really, really highly, but it is the man who needs no surname. I've actually, do you know what? I'm going to change that to saying Tommy.
Just Tommy.
Yeah, we'll just change that to Tommy. Brian Hogan against Declan Hannon. Both like to sit, both like to sweep. You could argue that, as a native forward, Declan Hannon might probably be the better ball player there, maybe move more swiftly. But like Hogan, some man to go up and collect the ball, very good sweeper, very competent. What way are you leaning here?
Hogan just did the simple things right, didn't he? He was just so effective. And the times you noticed Brian Hogan was when he wasn't there, because he was just so effective and it was a hard spot to fill. Fairness, John Tennyson came in the 2006 final and was good, but Brian Hogan was obviously missing in 2010 as well, and that's probably maybe forgotten a small bit. He had that, did he break his finger or something like that in training or something a couple of weeks before?
Are you trying to question Tip's unbelievable All-Ireland win in 2010?
No, but I just think it's funny. It always goes back to Henry and Henry, getting injured. But Brian Hogan, to me, like, I'm not saying he was as big of a loss, but he was a massive loss because it changed the whole shape of the team. When you come back to Hogan versus Hannon, Hannon can be kind of unheralded at times too, but he dictates the play far more. He sets up some amount of attacks. You would rarely have seen Brian Hogan coming forward to shoot for a score. I'd say Brian Hogan probably wasn't as comfortable on the ball as Declan Hannon is. I don't know if has there ever name me a back. Very good, James S. Staple wondering why Callan isn't on the team. I agree with him 100%. Can you name me a back who is more comfortable on the ball than Declan Hannon?
Let me see.
A back that's not his teammate.
Cahill Lyons, very comfortable on the ball. Let's see. Do you know what? You kind of caught me on the hop a little bit there. I think Mark Coleman. Mark Coleman
wouldn't be far off. Again, another real good kind of ball playing centre back. Declan Hannon probably doesn't get the kudos he deserves for his defensive abilities as well. It's like people think he can be got at. Maybe he can be. Have we seen it yet? No. He's very, very good defensively. Very good at getting his body in as well. I think that's a tight one now. I have to say, I do think it's tight, but I would definitely be favouring Hannon.
Yeah, I'd be looking for Hannon here too. Just about. I mean, again, I think everyone realises this isn't the case of insulting any of the lads that are left off the team. It's a bit of fun. It's two brilliant teams, two brilliant 15s, and we can only pick 15 out of the 30.
Anyone that loses out, Shane, is losing out to an opposition player on what is either the best or one of the best or the second best team of all time.
Well, look, that remains to be debated another day, whether these are the best. Pádraig Walsh ball playing back as well from Naoise Waldron, a Kilkenny native himself. So let's move on to the other wing back here. This is a very interesting one because, JJ Delaney is considered, arguably the best fullback, best wing back of all times, but he was obviously brilliant fullback also. And he spent, I remember looking at I went to one of the Kilkenny media nights and they had a booklet about all the players and they actually listed the amount of games that all the players had played in different positions. And JJ Delaney had played more games at cornerback than I'd actually recalled. So you could put him in a lot of different positions. But this is about 2008, and JJ Delaney was excellent that year, as he was pretty much every year. 2011, he got man of the match in an All-Ireland final. He's got pretty much every accolade you could talk about in the game. But there is a big frenzy over Kyle Hayes and how he's played and the goals he's scored. So if we're just going to talk about 1 year alone, are you going to look at Kyle Hayes' goal against Tipperary? Are you going to look at his goal against Cork, against probably stronger opposition than Kilkenny played in 2008, and say, well, look, if you're just going to go with picking that year in isolation, you might actually have to go with Hayes, even though you might say over the course of his career, JJ Delaney's one of the greats.
Yeah, it's an out-and-out defender against Kyle Hayes. To me, is an underrated defender. I think his defensive capabilities are savage. People maybe just look at him going forward, but Hayes can do something. Not saying that JJ couldn't do it, but he didn't do it or didn't have to do it. Hayes, is a new age wing back that rampages forward. Teams have to think about who's going to be marking him. Like, we haven't thought, that wasn't the case. Even with JJ or even with Tommy Walsh, teams didn't have to think as well. Saying that, Lara obviously followed Tommy around, so that's not to say that he wasn't being taught.
That worked out.
Yeah, that worked out really well. That's not to say that that wasn't the case for that Kilkenny team, but it's an out and out defender. As Andrew said there, Cody described him as the best defender he's ever seen, and I would say the same. To me, Brian Whelan is the best hurler I've ever seen, but JJ Delaney is the best defender I've ever seen. And it is a clash of styles. While they can both do the defensive duties, Hayes going forward does offer you something a little different.
Do you think, if you're the opposition manager, do you think you had to plan more for JJ Delaney back then or more for Kyle Hayes now?
I know from being in an Offaly dressing room that we planned, and it didn't work out, but we planned an awful, the big part of our plan was the Kilkenny half back line, and in particular JJ. And you can have all these great plans of, get this lad on the ball, get X, Y, and Z on the ball. If you can't break that, if you put that puck out down on top of JJ and he catches it overhead, which he invariably did, he did it to Dan the Man, one of the best in the air. He cleaned him out in the air in the All-Ireland semi-final 1 year. He could do it to anybody. It's two different things. That's not to say that you couldn't puck the ball. You could puck more ball down in Hayes, I would say, than you could on Delaney. Delaney would snap ball and would bring ball forward. Hayes doesn't snap ball like that. Unless I can't remember. I don't remember him snapping a lot of puck outs. Burns would be the one of their three halfbacks that would snap more ball, I think.
Oh, it's tough. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. But going the other direction, hurling has changed now. Your halfbacks need to be able to drive forward. Could JJ Delaney have done then, like he was a supreme hurler, could he have done then what Kyle Hayes is doing now, or with more modern preparation, S&C and whatever training has come in now? Was he capable of doing the devastating sort of things that Kyle Hayes has done? I don't know anyone else who could have scored that goal.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, but I don't know anybody else, and I don't know anybody else who would have got back for some of the incredible hooks or the incredible blocks. I don't know.
In 08.
Okay, well, I don't know anybody else that would have snuffed out some of the best attackers of the time in the way that he did, in the way that Delaney did at the time. In 08, you're obviously saying JJ had a couple of All-Stars in the bag, had come back from a cruise ship, was hurler of the year at this stage in 03 as well. Again, I will bring it back to Hayes is in his second season at wing back. Yes, he offers something completely different that we haven't seen before. But like as Nisha said there, it was Delaney Island. If you put the ball down there, this shark was going to go up and grab it, and you weren't going to get the ball. That was just the way it was.
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I do think it's a tough one because, you know, we all rate JJ Delaney as one of the best wing backs that you're ever going to see. But just what Kyle Hayes did this year, I mean, and I did talk about him a few times as if he's getting turned over. And earlier in the season, I was like, would you put Tim O'Mahony ahead of Kyle Hayes? I think in the wash-up, you're not going to do that. But I think it's closer than, like, there are people commenting in both directions here. But I do think it's JJ Delaney, but not by a whole pile.
No, there's very little in any of these. And obviously, there is a bit of recency bias comes into it because you see just how dominating Hayes is now. And plus, the game has changed so much. Like, it has. Like, would JJ adapt to the way hurling is now and maybe being a marauding wing back? I don't see why not, to be honest with you. I don't see why not. You're going to be conditioned differently and you're going to play differently. But as one of the viewers said there, this is like trying to pick your favorite child in some of these instances. Like, this is the cream of the cream, like you're picking from. But yeah, I think I would be giving it to JJ in that instance. But like, again, there's nothing between them.
Yeah, the cream of the cream, double cream. Midfield then, Cha or Will O'Donoghue? Geez, you couldn't have been picking two more different types of midfielders. Could you really?
No,
Cha scored a couple of points in the All-Ireland final. He scored 2 points against Watford that day. Not sure how much you can read into that. Will O'Donoghue, very physically dominant throughout that season. So if you're going to go, like, this is like picking apples against oranges, isn't it? And the same with Darragh O'Donovan against Derek Ling. Like, Derek Ling, up and down the field, up and down like a whore's knickers. You know, this sort of lad had some engine on it. What were you leaning?
Now, the only thing here now, right? The way we have it set up, I would prefer to have, like, is it possible? We're talking about midfield here. We're not talking about any other positions. To me, my midfield pairing is Will O'Donoghue and Derek Ling. That's the midfield pairing I would choose.
Is that for modern hurling or for hurling back then?
Both, really, to be honest with you. But I'm asking you, like, is it possible to we have Will O'Donoghue? Yeah, as Andrew says there, can we have Will O'Donoghue and Cha, or do we have to match? I don't think necessarily we have. I think we're picking the best two midfielders of the four. It's the only. Yeah. Okay. Like, I have to say, I love Derek Ling. I thought he was such a powerhouse, such an engine. If you're asking me, could he do what modern day midfielders do now? Yes, I think he was doing it then. I honestly do think he was doing it then, and he was flying forward to get scores as well. Imagine how strong, both defensively and offensively, you would be if you had Derek Ling and Will O'Donoghue in your team. Holy Christ. The cover you would have for your defenders would be unreal. You'd have these two powerhouses midfield, and you have two guys that are able to burst the tackle and go forward. It's just, they're the two I would pick, to be honest with you.
Will says he's only logging onto the stream now. Verney, you never mind what anyone says about your hair, all-star or not. You grow that bird's nest as long as you see fit.
Go on, Will, boy.
Yeah, Derek Ling was a beast, underrated like Limerick lads. He was a brilliant player, no doubt about it. A few people are messaging in about Michael Fennelly, but he was an unused sub in that final. So, you know, I mean, how do you work him into the team there? So are we going along with that then? We're going with with Will O'Donoghue and with
yeah, we're underselling Cha here. We definitely are. I'm just saying, like, Derek Ling was one of my favourite players in that Kilkenny team. I just thought he was the powerhouse, and I think Will O'Donoghue is that powerhouse for Limerick now. But Cha was music on the ball, like he was so good on the ball. He could he was kind of nearly pushed out of the Kilkenny team because it had become such a physical game. But like, imagine him now, and imagine him at modern day training now. He'd be the engine. Imagine the amount of ball playing he could do around the middle of the field. He could be probably like your Keane Lynch back then, if that was the way the game was played. I'm just saying, for me, it would be Derek Ling and Will O'Donoghue, but Cha would be a close third. And that's not to be disingenuous to Darragh O'Donovan. I just think he's coming up against some real heavyweights here.
Yeah, we all know you never like to be disingenuous, don't we?
Yeah.
So Will O'Donoghue and Cha, and Ling.
Are you happy? Are you happy with that? You haven't
I'm
given
pretty
much of an
happy.
argument against it, yeah.
I'm pretty much on board with that. They're both, like as Nisha says here, Chad could make the ball talk. Music on the ball is how Hussein playing for Kula is described. I'm not really sure that it is. I mean, I'd like it to be described that way, but it's not really happening. Now, we'll go with Derek Ling. He was a monster at the time. And Will O'Donoghue is something similar too. I mean, they're not all overly similar, but I think people know what I mean.
Derek Ling was at his best, I would say, around this time as well. For just the 1 or 2 years leading into this, and probably a year or two after.
Yeah, I just see him thundering around the field, and I mean that in a good way. Like, he's just really, really imposing guy. So it's starting to get tasty now. Garrod Hegarty or Goethe? Martin Comerford. I mean, Hegarty had a sort of he was hurler of the year in 2020. He wasn't quite to the same level in 2021, but he still scored 2-2 from play in an All-Ireland final and had a good season. So when I say he wasn't as good as 2020, the 2020 season, it's not an insult per se, but it isn't quite at that same level. So what do you think? What way are you leaning here?
Oh, that's difficult. Two kind of real forces of nature. Like, how many big scores did Comerford come up with for Kilkenny? You also have to bring his versatility into it. Probably 10, 11, 12. You could probably play 14 as well.
Didn't score in the final. Taken off after 43 minutes. Look, we're trying to find reasons to pick one over the other, but still say, obviously, Goethe was a brilliant player. Yeah,
Garrod Hegarty's 3 final appearances, what did he get? I think he got 2 points in 2018. He got 7 last year, and he got 2-2 the other day. It's difficult. I just thinking, like, Hegarty has probably hit higher heights, I would say. I'd say Comerford consistently hit a really good high. Like, he was still flying in 2003. Didn't he get the goal in 2003 that helped him over the line? That bouncy shot in front of Cusack. He's obviously been there a while, but was probably on the wane. Would that be fair to say? Like, he was a sub in 09 and came on again in 10, I think, did he?
He came on in 09 and scored that goal, the key game-breaking goal. But I think you can't, like, if we're looking for, like, in a game of fine margins, if we are looking for a reason to leave somebody out, being taken off after 43 minutes and not scoring in an All-Ireland final where he scored 330 versus another guy. And, TJ Reid came on in his place and scored 4 points. So, I mean, we're talking about a Waterford team that was wide open. I don't see how you leave Garrod Hegarty and 2-2 in an All-Ireland final out of this.
Yeah, and I just think as well, as good as Martin Comerford was, and I said his versatility was unreal, and his ability to hit the onion bag was huge as well. Hegarty's ability, fall back to the half-back line and score from there, particularly in the modern game, is huge. Like, and he's one of the most foulable players now. Hurler of the year last year, as Nisha said there. I think it's hard. I think it's kind of hard to. It's obviously two brilliant players, but I find it hard to go against Hegarty.
I do enjoy when you call people foulable players, and Shane O'Donnell is the first one that comes to mind because you always talk about him.
Big time.
Okay, right. We're going to go with Hegarty at right wing forward there, wearing the number 10 jersey. How about centre forward, Cian Lynch and Richie Power? Oh, God almighty, what have we gotten ourselves into here?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say about this is I think Richie's best form came later. Like, even in 14, when he got a crucial goal in 14, like, that's 6 years after this. He only made his debut. I think he made his debut in 05. I don't think he played in 04. It's either 04 or 05. So he's kind of on the scene, but he was kind of on and off the team a bit.
And he didn't win an All-Star in 2008. So, again, if we're looking for fine margins and reasons to leave guys out, like Henry Shefflin is named number 14 in this, but he won his All-Star at centre forward. Now, there would have been a bit of moving around or whatever, but that's just a point worth keeping. You might as well take that into account.
Yeah, like, I think, like, as good as Richie Power was, I don't think he was at his best at this time. And I do agree with Conor. Like, we both think Richie Power is class. And one of the reasons why Kilkenny have slipped off the radar, and particularly did after 15, were his injuries and the fact that he couldn't play inter-county hurling for another couple of years. But Cian Lynch, I was just reading this morning, like, he's going to be hurler of the year again this year. He's going to be a 2-time hurler of the year.
Oh, there's no doubt about
it.
Like,
he is joining, like, elite company. Like, Shefflin has 3, Brian Whelan has 2, and, you can count them, like, one hand, I'd say, the amount of people that have been multiple-time hurler of the year. So like he's at his very best at the moment. So yeah, it's I think it has to be Cian Lynch.
And then, okay, so we're agreed on that. We're putting Lynch in centre forward here. And I'm sure people are going to say when we get towards the very end of this, well, what if you move Shefflin out wherever and move somebody else in wherever? I even see someone commenting there that Gerta was excellent in a full forward, which he was, of course, but around this time, I don't think he was playing inside as much. Tom Morrissey, wing forward, or Owen Larkin? I think this is... I don't think there's much debate here. There's obviously massive debate here. But to me, Owen Larkin was at his very, very best in 2008. He won Hurler of the Year. To me, he was by a mile the best hurler in the country that year. And to me, it is going to be Owen Larkin all day here.
There's more of a debate than you think. Like, I think, now, to be fair, like Tom Morrissey is playing some of his best stuff. Like 2020, we both agree that he should have been shortlisted for Hurler of the Year. And I think we would nearly both say that he should have been Hurler of the Year in 2020. But I wouldn't be exaggerating. This year, he might be. He's in the conversation for. He might be make the shortlist. Might be just edged out. But like his semi-final performance was, another amazing performance. 5 points from play. He just makes it routine to score 4 or 5 points from play. I think you tweeted during the final, and Tom Morrissey's going to score 5 points from play again because that's like he only ended up with 3, but that's just like that's what he does. Like, and his it's funny, they both play very, very similar roles in the sense that Larkin probably, and you've talked about before, but Mick Dempsey coming in and, they started to play these real deep lying wing forwards that, travelled up and down the pitch. Like Larkin was often seen the half back line as well. Like his foraging was as good as his scoring. I don't know if Kilkenny had a better forager than him. As you said, though, Larkin was this was his best. This was the best he was at probably for Kilkenny. Was at this time, subsequent Hurler of the Year. I do think this is very close, I have to say. But I would be giving the nod to Larkin, but it is very, very close. It's not the foregone conclusion. You were trying to write off the hand, man.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I never tried to write him off. I actually said straight out he was Hurler of the Year last year. And again, fine margins and all that kind of crack. But like Larkin, first day out, scored 4 points against you. He'll probably be disappointed he only got 4 against. When there's an 8 like you involved in the opposition, he should be scoring more. He scored 3 against Wexford in the Leinster final. Then moving on to the All-Ireland semi-final, scored 1-2 against Cork. They scored just 1 goal in that game. Scored 1-4 in the All-Ireland final against Waterford. And I remember him setting up goals as well, the way he solos through. Everyone knows how good he is at that and setting up goals and taking the ball on the burst. And when he's like soloing through at pace, you kind of feel like, right, this lad's just about to set something up or score here. So for my money, Michael Verney has just dropped off the line there. But I'm going to go ahead and make the executive decision to throw Owen Larkin into this team. I think Michael's just coming back on here, but I'll get the team up here. And Tom Morrissey, very good. Taking off the first day against Cork. Now, you're not going to write off his entire season over that and that alone. But Michael, I'm just going through Larkin and his performance in the All-Ireland final that year, scoring 1-4, setting up chances, destroying Watford. Tom Morrissey, really good all year. Maybe not quite the same level of a final, taking off the first day against Cork. So obviously he had a very, very good year, but I think we're agreed on Larkin.
Yeah, and I think the worrying thing from an opposition's point of view is that Morrissey can get better and probably will get better, and that's seriously worrying. And he could hit the heights of Larkin and could surpass them, but at this moment in time, you'd have to give it to Larkin. He was at his best. Yeah,
Connor says if Shefflin was at 11, then it would have been a good debate with Lynch. Well, maybe we'll kind of do that another day.
The red-haired wizards, we've gone through that before. My God, like it's just, if you have red hair, your chances of being one of the best hurlers of all time is greatly increased.
Yeah. Patrick Coleman says that Lynch cannot be left out, and he wasn't. Maybe you're watching a little bit behind on the stream. So right, let's get into the full forward line here. Starting off with number 13. Eddie Brennan or Aaron Gillard? Now, that's a pretty tasty one, isn't it?
Well, there's no point in saying any different. Any hope you have of playing for the coolest seniors this year goes out the window if Aaron Gillard has picked at number 13, and that's just a fact.
Yeah, well, look, I haven't been at training lately, and I mean, probably because we knew this debate was coming up at some point. So, Eddie, there's the reason why I haven't been. Yeah, as well, Flash says, Gillard and Brennan. Jesus, how do you pick between them? So, looking at the All-Ireland final, Eddie Brennan scored 2-4.
2-4. Yeah,
and over the course of the season, scored 4-9 in 4 games over the course of the season.
This is the final where Brian Cody got man of the match, and Eddie was robbed of back-to-back man of the matches in All-Ireland finals, which I don't know if that's happened. But he was robbed of it by some genius in RTE who said
someone thought they were clever. I mean, what a ridiculous idea! That really annoyed me. I have to say that's an insult both to Watford, to the players, and almost to Cody in a way. Do you think he wants that nonsense?
Yeah, there's times, and it often happens on the field when lads are trying to be too clever. And this is one of those instances. It was Eddie Brennan was man of the match, in fairness.
Yeah. Aidan Doherty makes a good point here. He says, after building up a rep in Kilkenny for underperforming in finals, Eddie's return from play in 07, 08 and 09 finals was outrageous.
That's a fact, yeah. Like, he scored 1-5 in the 07 final, and like it was a tactic, obviously, for Kilkenny to go after the inexperienced Seamus Hickey, and he kept that form in 08. Like, this was Eddie at his best, you would have to say, in 08. He was at his best. Was Galan at his best in 2021? Probably not. He was superb in the final, though.
Yeah, and Eddie doesn't miss goal chances, really. And I think if you were to have Eddie Brennan in 2008 or Aaron Galan in 2021 with a one-on-one chance with the goalkeeper to score. I mean, we saw Galan putting one over the bar against Watford. He nearly knocked another one over the bar, hit the underside of the crossbar and went in past Sean O'Brien. And then obviously scored a goal in the final. But I'm going to take Eddie Brennan to score the goal more often. I'm going to take Galan.
Eddie Brennan's misses were that rare that you can actually still remember them. Like, I still remember the one at the start of the 2010 final. Remember that one where he pulled on it and kind of Coleman smothered it, I think? Like, when he got in those positions, it was just, as Cyril used to say, it was bang back at a net. That's just a fact. Flash says there, Galan's best year, I do think, was in 2019. And that was when he got his first All-Star. And he was superb against Kilkenny, and like he's very good.
I disagree. He had about 5 wides that game, and a lot of them on his right side.
Okay, but he was very good that year. That was the year he was brilliant in the Munster final that year as well. He's obviously. I just think last year and this year he delivered 2 really good All-Ireland final performances, and yes, big game performances are huge. Some of what came between was below what he would probably expect from himself, and what we expect from him probably too, I'd say. So I just favouring Eddie, I have to say. Eddie was as good as he ever was at this stage. Yeah,
okay, we're agreed on that one. Do you know what? Seamus Flanagan was in Hurler of the Year form this year and could end up in the shortlist, or he could. Henry Shefflin's obviously the better hurler in terms of like what he's done over the course of his career. That's not up for debate here. But Henry Shefflin, was he as good in 2008 as Seamus Flanagan has been in 2021?
Shefflin did the cruciate in the 07 final, and he somehow managed to keep up his record of not missing of starting every championship game for Kilkenny. He started against us in the first round. Remember, he started corner forward. He wasn't himself. Probably wasn't at his best in 08, from what I can remember. But you're looking at, was he a 2-time hurler of the year at that stage? No, he wasn't. He was. He was. Yeah, he was hurler of the year in 2000, wasn't he? And he was hurler of the year again in 06. So he had a 2-time hurler of the year. He probably had 6 or 7 All-Stars at this stage as well. It's unfortunate for Flanagan to be coming up against Shefflin, but that's like, whether it's 10, 11 or 12 or 14, wherever he played, he was just he's an absolute genius with the ball. And even like without the ball, as I said earlier, that was one of his best traits, was when he was without the ball, he was a supreme defender as well. But Flanagan, in fairness to him, Flanagan brought his form to another level this year. He only scored a point in the final, which I couldn't believe looking back on it. I think he set up about 1-5 and was just like a wrecking machine at different stages.
So you're saying there's no debate?
Sure. Like, if we're talking about some of the best hurlers of all time, Shefflin is going to be in the top 2 or 3. So I don't think there's really a debate.
Well, I'm not debating that point, which is very different to the point we are talking about, which is that season alone. And I'll go through the performances in those games. Up against Offaly in the first round, Henry Shefflin scored 11 points, 1 from play. The Leinster final against Wexford scored 1-7, 0 from play. Going into the All-Ireland semi-final against Cork, scored 11 points, 5 from play. And in the final, scored 8 points, 2 from play. So over the course of the season, that's a return of 8 points from play. So are you saying that that's above what Seamus Flanagan managed in his games? Like those games where he scored 5 points.
I like your moxie. You did a bit of research and you made a bit of a case.
Well, I just did it there off the top of my head. Like, I mean, if you want to look, there are things there that you can talk about.
There definitely are. I think, like, if we're only
you're getting carried away with the body of work over the course of the career. Let's be honest.
No, if we're only looking at scores, like you say, Seamus Flanagan only scored a point in the All Ireland final. Like, I don't remember what. Like, I look back at the OA final and see what Sheffield set up. I'm sure it was quite a bit. Like, but like, Flanagan only got a point in the final. If that's what you want to say, if we're just basing it on scores.
Okay, yeah, but I said 8 over the course of the season. We look at Flanagan. He got 2 the first day out against Cork. He got 1-3 against Tip. So that's 1-5. Then the semi-final, he got another 4. So that's 1-9. So 1-10. So just if you're to go with scores alone, you know, it's not like just dismiss the argument, because we know that Sheffield obviously goes down as the great, and Flanagan has an awful lot of work to do to go down as a Limerick great. You know, so I mean, we're not talking about two lads in the same sphere at all. But just in the course of that season, Sheffield did end up with an All-Star. Of course he did. But there is a discussion to be made.
You have to say as well, Seamus Flanagan obviously debuted for Limerick in 18. He's won 3 All-Irelands in 4 years. Sheffield debuted in 99. I'm talking about the body of work up until the 08 final. Won in 2000, won Hurler Deer in 2002, won again in 2003, 5, 6, 7, 8. I appreciate your effort.
Well, you can appreciate it, but like, what part of what I'm saying can you expose? Like, where am I wrong?
If you were picking, a team in 2000, whether it's, just say both of these players are in their pomp. We'll just say both of these players are in their pomp. Sheffield in 2008, Flanagan 2021. Who are you picking? But
that's the whole point. Like,
yeah, I'm asking you to make a decision.
But I'm saying that Sheffield won 3 hurlers of the year. None of them were this season, and we just looked at what he scored over the course of the games from play in games where, beating the lard out of Offaly, beating the lard out of Wexford, beating Cork comfortably, and beating the lard out of Waterford, versus Flanagan probably in tighter games, and he did score more. So I'm not questioning who's a better player here. I'm just saying you can't just ignore what I'm saying and say, it's Sheffield over the course of his career, what he'd done at that point. I'm talking about year for year. Was that a quieter year for Sheffield? He's only coming back from a cruciate, of course.
Yeah, sure, probably was. He still ended up with his 8 All-Star at the end of the year.
Yeah. Look, I mean, who had tougher opposition that year? Kilkenny in 2008 or Limerick this year?
Actually, you'd have to say Limerick had tougher opposition.
So at what point are you going to say that there's at least a debate to be had here? And maybe invalidate some of what I'm saying.
But we're having a debate.
Yeah, but you're not actually making any points or countering what I'm saying. You're just saying, look, I mean, he's one of the greats of all time.
Well, he's also, it's not as if he had a bad 2008 season.
Sure, he didn't say that. We're talking about who had the better one.
Yeah, well, that's not to say. But like, we just, you're talking about, so you want me to say that just because Flanagan might have had a better 2021 season that we should, might have had, that we should pick him in this team?
No, but I'm just saying we're picking it based on that season alone. We're not saying we're picking who's the better player ever or who's the better player up until that particular part of their career. We're just saying based on 2008, the performances in 2008 in isolation, 2021 in isolation, who are you going to pick based on what they delivered that year?
Yeah, we kind of are taking in previous performance into the equation now, in fairness.
Okay, well, you've just moved the goalpost after you laid this all out at the start, and now you're changing the game. You did with Tony Kelly in the All-Star team.
But we are saying about previous performance. We're not talking about post performances after this year. But we have talked about, like, Sheffield has a 10-year career coming up to this point. Flanagan has a 4-year career. We can't talk about now.
No, but we said we can't talk about Sheffield or Kilkenny 2006 against Cork when we're talking about 2008. We are talking about that year in isolation.
Okay. Do you want to put Seamus Flanagan in full forward then?
Well, do you? Have I said enough?
No, I don't want to put him in full forward. As good of a year as he had, like, I still would want Sheffield over him any day of the week.
Well, of course, I'd want him any day of the week. Like, there's no doubt about that.
Any day of the week, including a week in 2021 or in 2008 when we're picking this team.
I'll tell you what, the old Stockholm Syndrome has really, really got to you at this stage. the Offaly Stockholm syndrome for Kilkenny. Right, we'll pick Shefflin. No doubt that he's the better player, and obviously goes down as one of the greats of all time. Then final position, Casey versus Taggy. Peter Casey scored 5 points inside 24 minutes. A look at the All-Ireland final, 3 points for Taggy that day. What way are you starting to lean here?
I'd have to be leaning towards Casey. 15 points from play over the course of the championship. If I was looking at Taggy's career, I would say it probably peaked in 06 when he was man of the match in the All-Ireland final and got 1-3. If I was looking at Casey, Casey's been very good for Limerick up until this year, but this year was his best year by some distance. Was it 5 points against Cork the first day? He ended up with a similar margin against Tip. He got maybe 3 or 4 against Tip, 3 against Tip, 2 against Waterford in the All-Ireland semi-final, and then 5 in the All-Ireland final in inside 24 minutes.
Yeah, it was the other way around. It was 3 against Cork and 5 against Tipperary. So I take your point. So yeah, very, very good season there. Taggy, obviously brilliant player, and scoring 3 points against Waterford, pretty good in the final. I just check and see what else he scored in some of the other games. I mean, obviously that isn't completely the be-all and end-all of these arguments, but scored a goal against G the first day out, scored 1-1 in the Leinster final against Wexford, so both of those games, absolute cakewalks. 5 points in the semi-final against Cork, definitely can't dismiss that, 123 to 17 point win. So that game was a game, and then scored 3 points in the All-Ireland final.
Yeah, it's a decent tally when you put. I know you're saying the first 2 games were cakewalks, but there's a decent tally put together in that year. In fairness, now.
Yeah, Flash says Casey better be in there. I'll be sending a message to Verney next time I'm in Offaly. Next, will you do all-time best Limerick Kilkenny teams? Oh my God, that would be a disaster trying to figure that one out. But a good suggestion, Jack Nulty. Verney, all of a sudden looking at 2021 Casey versus 2008 career of Sheffield versus career of Flanagan. I mean, look, you gotta start coming in here and going hard at Verney, because there's an awful lot of this sort of Kilkenny bias. I don't do Tipperary bias, as everyone knows, but there's a lot of Kilkenny bias with this lad, this Offaly man here. So we're going with that, yeah.
We're going with Casey.
We're going with Casey ahead of Fogarty.
Yeah, it's based on what you read out there. I didn't think he'd had as good of a year as that.
Yeah, but just to score 5 points in 24 minutes of an All-Ireland final, both teams destroyed their opposition in that final. You just can't get away from that. And
he was unmarkable.
And in a more competitive run, a tougher run to the final, he put up some decent scores. Nisha says here, Taggy was savage, added so much more than just scores, showed he could move into another realm and dance with the stars. Yeah, but this might just have to be Casey. I think Casey showed he can move too. Shane makes very good points against Shefflin. It's not against Shefflin per se. It's more that, obviously Shefflin's all-time great, had a good season, back from the cruise ship, maybe not quite. I wouldn't rank it in his top 3 or 4 seasons, but put it that way. Go on, Shane Boy says the Donny 99. People think I'm trying to slate him now. I'm not at all. I actually used to work with him in the bank and everything. He's a great fella, so I'm definitely not trying to have a pop. But people do kind of run away with it when you start. Does this mean that I have a problem with Diarmaid Burns or with Kyle Hayes because I didn't pick them? No, it's just a debate and a bit of fun. And that is what it is, isn't it?
Yeah. Just on Casey as well, you have to remember this was Casey's first All-Ireland final to start, and he winds up with 5 points. And now, if he hadn't been injured, he would have ended up with 8 or 9. That's just the way he was. He was literally unmarkable on that day. So I'd probably be just giving the nod to Casey, in fairness. And I hope he gets back at some stage next year and features for Limerick.
Yeah, Flash says, King Henry lost the title a long time ago, lads. Joe is king. Joe Canning is obviously referring to who was the best player overall between Limerick 2021, Kilkenny 2008. I didn't expect to come to that, but a great question from Jack Nulty. And keep the comments flying in. We absolutely love them. It does add so much to it.
Well, it's like this, Shane. If we're looking at, as we said, and maybe I've jumped around a bit, we're looking at this 2021 in isolation and 2008 in isolation. So you're looking, essentially, are you looking back at the hurlers of the year? Is that what you're looking at?
Well, just before we said, we've Kilkenny with 8 players here and Limerick with 7, just before anyone asks. And we do have a little quick look at the lads on the sideline as well. But, God, best player. I mean, Owen Larkin is the one jumping straight off the page to me straight away for his performances that year. Who's going to be hurler of the year in 2021? Keane Lynch. God almighty, trying to pick between Keane Lynch and Owen Larkin here. You could argue that Shefflin's the better player of all time. Well, his obviously his CV makes him the better player of the lot of them here at the moment. Well, basically, he is the best of the lot here. But like Cian Lynch versus Larkin for 2008 versus 2021. Is there anyone else you want to consider in that particular debate?
Well, Tommy's form was obviously just the whole way up, and he was obviously after winning another All-Star at the end of this year. He's after winning his 6th in a row at the end of this year. JJ was after winning his 4th at the end of this year. Tommy would probably come into the conversation because he was coming into his best. If you look at the routes to the final, you'd have to say Lynch did more against a better quality of opposition in 2021 than Larkin probably did in 2008. That's probably what might tip it. He ended up with six from playing a final as well, and set up so much and rarely put a foot wrong throughout the whole year.
You probably can't remember off the top of your head, but do you have any idea if he made any special plans for Larkin that day in 2008?
Don't remember. Shane, you'd be making special plans for everyone. When you were playing them, that was the thing as well, is that you might try and make special plans for Henry, and then just someone else would light it up. Like just one of the other 5 will absolutely light it up, even if you manage to hold Shefflin scoreless or manage to hold him down at all. But I'd probably be just favouring Lynch because, I don't know if I thought he could take his game to this high of a level as quickly, maybe after even 2018, and all the pressure that comes up in Hurler of the Year and having a target on your back and being the man that every team is going after. And he's just managed to take his form to another level, in fairness to him. It's quite, the fact that they're both left-handers as well, I think is an interesting one, that we're both, fighting over who's the best hurler of that year as well, is interesting too.
Yeah, Nisha added 2 Katogues, Larkin and Lynch, both very good in the air. Larkin better, great engine, unreal work rate. But if I was playing a match to decide my life, Larkin would be the choice here. Just from that year, he scored 4 points against G, 3 in the Leinster final against Wexford. Ended up with 1-2 against Cork in the semi-final and 1-4 in the final. And it did stand out to me at the time. I do very clearly remember thinking that of all these players on a team that's battering everybody, to me, Larkin stood head and shoulders above the rest of the Kilkenny players in 2008. And it wasn't even up for question that he was hurler of the year, in my opinion, at the time. So there could be a little bit of recency bias when you look at Lynch and just talk about the performances he gave. But the reason that I asked you is, did you make any special plans for Larkin that year, is because every team was pretty much making special plans for Lynch. First day out against Cork, he wasn't always marking him, but Jeremy Millerick seemed to be picking him up the whole time. And then when he wasn't available for the final, is that the main reason that Lynch ended up going to town, because he was up largely against Coleman and it just did not work out for Cork. Dan McCormick had the man-marking job the next day out. Trying to remember the semi-final, of course, didn't Conor Gleeson go and try and man-mark Lynch, and 6 points from playing the final, set up 2-4, something ridiculous like that. To me, slightly just going to have to edge for Cian Lynch here, but 2 brilliant players at the height of their powers. Yeah,
and you are it's just that's 13 years ago. I don't remember. I'd have to look back at it and see. But I whereas this year's final is to the forefront of my mind. But Lynch was good in 18, as I said, but he's taken his game to another level this year. Larkin was brilliant up until 2008. 2008 was probably the high point. One thing I would agree with Nisha is he was so good in the air. Cian Lynch is very good, and he's good in the air, but Larkin could just come in and play or hurl almost and get away with it. He had it perfected that much. It's a tight one. Probably just to Lynch as well. He's winning hurler here for the 2nd time this year. That's that just shows how high his levels have reached.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But look, we're just about going to go for Lynch here. We'll put him in as what are we going to call him here? Are we going to call him the captain or just the king?
Just put HOTY behind him.
Yeah, okay. Grant. Now, we just quickly look at the management teams, because it's an interesting one. Kylie versus Cody. Cody got man of the match in an All-Ireland final. But the number...
John Kylie never got man of the match in an All-Ireland final.
Yeah, Kylie, will you ever cop on? You have a bit more work to do here. But then the number 2s, interestingly, 2 football men. And, we talked about this the other day, but, it's screaming out at us. Football tactics in a hurling team definitely does help, because one of the big things that turned Kilkenny around is that their wing forwards basically play like Gaelic football wing forwards, and they were up and down.
Yeah, no, definitely, yeah. And the tactics we talked about with Hegarty and Morrissey are similar tactics that Nick Dempsey would have probably started to implement with Kilkenny after he came in at the end of 2005. So I definitely think that's interesting, and maybe the fact that looking at it with a different viewpoint, looking at hurling with a different kind of a lens, maybe. Just on Kinnerk, he's won 4 All Irelands. None of obviously 3 with Limerick, 1 with Clare, 3 under 21 All Irelands with Clare as well as coach. Like both with counties that success has not been there hasn't been a lot of it in either of those counties. Whereas Kilkenny, are expected to win an All Ireland most years. So Dempsey's role was obviously massive. But like what Kinnerk has done with counties kind of coming out of the blue, like you couldn't have said at the start of 2018, you wouldn't have been predicting Limerick to win no more than you would with Clare in 2013. Obviously, since Limerick won their first one, you're going to be predicting that they're going to be there or thereabouts. But what he has done, and they've both coaches have kind of revolutionised how hurling is played at that moment in time, haven't they? They really, really have. I think that's fascinating to look at. I always think, comparing Kylie and Cody, that Kylie, he might never say it, but I'd say he has mirrored himself on Cody somewhat. He might be a little less frosty and a bit more accepting than Brian Cody at times, but I wouldn't say it's definitely not beyond him to tell lads as it is, and I'm sure he has and will continue to do. But I do think you have 2 managers that are quite similar, I have to say, and they have 2 coaches that are very similar.
Yeah, and two managers, are they on the back of 3 and 4 years? They are. Well, Kilkenny won a 3 in a row this year, and Limerick have just won their 3rd in 4 years. Obviously, before that, Kilkenny hadn't won it for 2 seasons. God, this is a tough one. I think, God almighty, how do you decide this if you're just going 1 year in isolation?
Yeah. Looking at Cody's All Irelands up until this point, he's obviously won in 2000, 02, 03. 6, 7, and 8, and Kylie he's 6 to Kylie's 3 at this stage.
I'll put it to you this way: Cody had to come through 0 adversity in the games that year. They just went out instead going, and they battered everyone from the front. Limerick had to come from 10 points behind to beat Tipperary, and maybe what they did at the water breaks, you can include the coaches in this, maybe the fact that they had to find a way to come from behind and that they had to negotiate better teams that year, just in isolation, might give it to Kylie. Like, you can't blame Kylie for what he hasn't yet won, because he might go on to win 2 or 3 more. Like, so we're not going to talk about Cody going off and winning 5 or 6 more All Irelands, whatever it was at that point. So we can't really talk about that. So maybe just the fact that they came through more adversity might give it to John Kylie.
I think the fact that Kylie has managed to negotiate all the pressure that comes with All Ireland success in a county where it's 45 years since they had won the last one in 1973. Then they win in 18, and they're able to go this year then and do back-to-back for the first time in their county's history. Cody did 3 in a row, obviously, in 08, had been done before in Kilkenny. I'd probably be just leaning towards John Kylie, if I'm honest.
Yeah, Flash says Kylie could get it based off that 3rd quarter against Tip, but maybe people might discredit him and give more credit to Kinnerk. To be fair, he doles out a fair bit of credit to Kinnerk himself. But Nick Dempsey did help completely revolutionise Kilkenny. I think that point has to be brought up time and again. He'd won 9 county titles with his club. Was it St. Joseph's in Leash? Yeah. And it's such a big factor in that. So, but are you giving it to? Are you going both Kilkenny or both Limerick, or can we mix and match here?
Coach and manager.
Yeah,
I think we should put the management team as a whole. If I'm honest, I think
we'll be going Kylie and Kinnerk.
We'll be asking who the best physio is. Yeah, I'd probably go. Janie Mac. I do think, like, Kilkenny expect to win. Limerick did not expect to win. And I think how they've managed that success, obviously Kylie being the manager, has been the one driving that. That's like that has to impress people to me. It has to.
Kinnerk is more lauded. I mean, everyone's been talking about Kinnerk. I don't know if people were talking about Dempsey to the same degree back then, were they?
No, but we probably weren't forensically analysing games as much then. It was, maybe we thought there was less to analyse, even though there was. Even though, like, we thought that some people thought that Kilkenny didn't do tactics, even though they quite clearly did. But I'd be narrowly favouring Kylie and Kinnerk.
Okay, yeah, sure. Like the whole tactics thing, the devil's greatest trick was to convince people that he didn't exist. Isn't that what
Kaiser Soze, yeah.
Yeah. And then, actually, Joe, what, just a quick word for the benches, though, that year for Kilkenny, because it was pretty ridiculous. I'll see if I can bring it on screen here.
This is a joke. This bench is ridiculous. You'll never see a bench like this again.
Yeah, 1 second now. I'll bring it up here, and hopefully people can see it. Scroll all the way down to it. Okay, so hopefully people can see that okay. I know the text is a small bit small, but bear with us all the same. The bench was, and some of these lads had probably established themselves more than others at this stage, but James McGarry, John Dalton, PJ Delaney, James Ryle, John Tennyson, Canis Hickey, Donncha Cody, Sean Cummins, Michael Fennelly, Richie Mullally, Michael Rice. Obviously the benches were allowed more back then, but you also had Willie O'Dwyer, TJ Reid, Richie Hogan, Owen Reid. So how many hurlers of the year are in there? So you've got Michael Fennelly, TJ Reid, and Richie Hogan. Jeez, it's not bad, is it?
No, it's not bad. And imagine to think they only brought on 2 subs and one of them was a goalie and the other was TJ Reid. Imagine like the class that was sitting on the bench.
But actually, that's bad form from Brian Cody. I mean, you're absolutely battering the team. How can he get man of the match when he won't even give the lads a run from the bench?
There you go. Yeah, maybe he didn't want anybody to come in and impress and potentially take the accolade away from him.
Yeah, just actually, Sean, when I think about that, that is very bad form not to bring more lads in that day. Okay, and then just the bench for Limerick is Barry Hennessy, Conor Boylan, Aaron Costello, Colin Coughlin, Richie English, Robbie Hanley, Graham Mulcahy, Barry Murphy, Cahill O'Neill, David Reedy, and Pat Ryan. So again, we can't punish them for what they haven't yet done in their careers. Some of them could go on to do great things. Because that's TJ Reid and the boys hadn't won hurler of the year at that stage.
I think if we're looking, like the Limerick 2018 bench was savage with Shane Dowling coming in and with Peter Casey coming in. That same, since Dowling retired and McCasey is starter, the same quality is not in the Limerick bench. And I think that's why I find most interesting about Peter Casey being out next year. Who comes in? How does that affect their starting 15? And then how does that affect their impact off the bench as well? And that's going to be, I'm sure Kylie is already thinking, how am I going to strengthen my panel here? How am I going to get like a person to slip in for Casey and more options off the bench? It's the only real weakness that I can find in Limerick, and we're probably picking holes to say that their bench isn't as strong as maybe other benches.
Yeah, so we even said going into the final that we think Cork had a stronger bench, and I still believe that.
I would still think that. Yeah.
Porrick Gill says anyone could manage that Kilkenny team. Same with Kerry in the 70s and the current Dublin era, likes of Mickey Hart and Kylie had to build from scratch. So that's a strong point, actually.
I totally disagree. I totally disagree.
On what basis?
One second now. Padjo Whelan was over the Burr teams, the great Burr teams, and people always say that anybody can manage them. And like I've been in dressing rooms with a lot of those lads. Yes, they're big personalities in that, but you need somebody steering the ship. It's not just a case of you could throw anybody in there. The quality of the training won't be the same. The messages, instruction won't be the same. The right team won't be picked on a given day. Yes, it helps to have those players at your disposal, and it helps to have those leaders that will drive things on. But to say anybody could manage those teams is nonsense, in my opinion.
No, but the point he made is they had to build them from scratch. So Cody came in with Kilkenny, and it's not like they were a team that was doing nothing and hadn't won an All-Ireland for 45 years. If you look at the amount of coaching done on the sideline and with the tactics board and all that, there's a great comment in here from Aidan Doherty. Would Cody allow a Kinnerk whiteboard on the sideline? Don't know if you would. But just seems to me that there was, like, if you threw that Kilkenny team in 2008, they'd probably walk over all those teams anyway. And obviously he's a huge reason for that. Whereas, like, there felt like there was more in-game management from Limerick for the reasons we talked about in the turnaround against Tip and that sort of stuff. So, like, without a manager, would Kilkenny have walked to the All-Ireland in 08 anyway?
At that point, probably because Cody had him in that sort of position where they potentially could have, and anybody could have taken over in 2008. But he put them in that position where they could do that. Do you know what I mean? But I totally appreciate his point. Kylie building from scratch, and again, as I said, in a county that's not used to winning, to build a squad, one thing, to build a backroom team that could that he's able to control such big characters with big reputations and keep it all running seamlessly is amazing. You have to think as well, Cody's managing less people in Kilkenny, I would say. A lot less people, coaching wise.
Yeah, and you know what? I've made this point before about, people would look back at the Coola team that did well there for a few years when the All-Irelands and say, Ash, look at all those players, how could you not? But Matty Kenny did pull it all together. So
yeah, I don't buy that point. The person steering the ship is so important.
Yeah, so Nisha adds, Cody made some of those fellas into top-class senior players that weren't superstars underage. Owen Larkin, a prime example. Gertie too, Jerry Kling and Jackie Tyrrell. So Gil's point is totally wrong from up above. So I think we'll just have one final look at it there. Will we? Have we anything else to add into this before we finish up on the show today?
No, but sure, when you look at that starting 15, according to Pádraig Cahill, anyone can manage them. Even though they're from different counties.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look. Sure. Shall we leave it at that? So, will we?
Yeah. A1. Yeah. I tell you what. You'd love to be. You wouldn't mind slipping in somewhere if anyone left that starting 15. You'd be happy enough to slip in there somewhere. You'd have fairly decent lads around you anyway.
And you stop the lights, you'd be getting ball in the front foot all over the place. Do you know what? You'd be tired from getting ball in. So just a reminder, we're brought to you by OurGameRetro.com. If you want to get this class Wexford jersey, that cool Mead one, any of the other ones, go to OurGameRetro.com. Use the profile or the promo code OurGame. Also, would love if people would subscribe to the channel, especially on all the different channels, but especially on YouTube. If you click the button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, it's free to subscribe. It helps the channel because it gets recommended to more people. Obviously, we want to build the channel going into the future. Also, if you want audio podcasts, go to patreon.com/OurGame. $5 a month to support the channel. When you think of all the stuff we're putting out, it's probably not that big of a commitment. We'd hope that people would subscribe. Many have already, but if people could keep doing it, that'd be great. So that's about the height of it, Michael. Sure, look, we'll get you again, will we?
Take her handy, Shane. Mind yourself.